everybody, good evening and welcome to your very own BYJU'S 9th and 10th grade channel. I'm your teacher Aishwarya and I welcome you to today's class where we are going to be discussing the chapter Improvement in Food Resources. So I hope that all of you here are excited for today's class, and very quickly students, please do let me know if my audio, my video and my screen and whatever I'm writing on the screen is visible to all of you. If it is, give me a quick thumbs up to let me know that we are good to go, that I am audible and everything is fine. Good evening, Tanushri, Priya, Astha, Abhimanyu, Jay, Harsimran, Saloni. Yes, good evening. Okay, awesome. Yes. Very good. I can see many of you are here. Now, I know this particular chapter in general was something you guys were waiting for a very long time. Because first and foremost, in biology, we just have only 3 chapters. We finished our first 2 chapters in term 1. But now we're left to the last chapter. Now, this chapter can seem little boring. Now, you can be honest with me. If you feel it is boring, you can be honest. Arey ma'am, ye crops hai. Some hybridization is happening. I don't know, ma'am. Then you are also going to be talking about all other kinds of things like, animals, how we grow them. How exactly is this going to be interesting for me? Or is this chapter something that is necessary for all of us to know, right? See, when you read it at once, you'll feel like, ma'am, so much ratifying to do. I don't think it's my cup of tea. But it's a very practical chapter, which means that today we are going to be looking at some problems that we face at a broader level, right? Now, food and food security is going to be a problem in the upcoming years. And why do I say problem? Because of climatic changes, because of a lot of other factors, we are seeing that if we don't come up with smart ways to produce or manufacture food for the larger masses, then we will be in trouble, right? Which is why it is important that all of us learn this chapter, because this chapter is very practical. So today we will be understanding how we can improve, what are the methodologies we can apply. And let me tell you, a lot of day-to-day, I'll not say day-to-day, but a lot of fields and branches of science are heavily dependent or they are derived from this, which is why in this case today we will be exploring this chapter in great detail. So students, very quickly, I hope that you are excited for this class. So when you do come to class, I always tell you, have your notebooks and textbooks ready. Make sure you have your stationery ready. Make sure you have water bottle and make sure that you have a quiet place to sit and study. Now let me tell you all a few things. Yes, Vimala, we are very excited to start the class. But I will recommend that you keep these few things in mind. Not because I come under the bracket of a strict teacher, but it makes for effective learning, right? First and foremost, today's class is going to be a long class. I am estimating that it will be done in 2 hours. But it could go on for more as well, which means that in case if you are not able to watch this live, it's okay, come back and watch it once it is done. Now if you are somebody who's watching it after the live stream, put it in 2x and watch it. Second thing, this particular chapter, right? This particular chapter is going to be examination relevant, which is why we will also be solving a lot of questions. And I will give you breaks in between also, because I will also require breaks. And of course, I am still recovering, so please don't mind if my throat sounds weird. Now next up, you are all in 9th grade, which means that you are old enough to be responsible. So kindly avoid spamming in class. Kindly avoid saying things like, ma'am, you are ignoring me. Ma'am, you don't care about me. Ma'am, you are not taking it. When I am teaching you, right, when I'm teaching you, I may not look at the comments. But that doesn't mean that I'm voluntarily deciding not to answer your questions. I will be doing doubt boards and we will be taking your doubts during those doubt boards. Last but not the least, right? Kindly avoid having parallel conversations in the chat. We have noticed, especially for grade 9, you have this beautiful tendency to get carried away because you think that, ma'am, board exam is anyway not there anytime soon. Why to clear, right? Or why to be, stressed out about? Because your seniors by this time, they will not do this idle chat. You guys will be like, see, I can see a lot of idle chat already. So kindly avoid doing that, because if that happens, you will miss out on what I teach. When you miss out on what I teach, you will say that, ma'am, you are not teaching properly, or ma'am, you missed out this part, right? So I hope that we are all clear right now. I am just about to get started. I have disbanded the idea of like leaders. From now on, I'm not even going to touch upon like leaders. So let's forget about that. So everybody, very quickly, we shall get started. Now, do not forget to hit the like button on this video. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button as well. So I hope that your Josh is super duper high. Awesome. That's great, Jainesh. That's great, right? ठीक है. Now, let's start with a very day-to-day example. Now today, if say mama or somebody at home asks you to maybe get some groceries, right? Go buy vegetables. We need bhindi, we need aloo, we need, we need some tomato. We want to make a sabzi at home because we have guests coming. You quickly run and buy sabzi. This has happened to all of us. This is not new, where nobody has been asked to go and buy sabzi. Now what will happen? You will either go to the sabzi wala who has a cart, right? Normally there will be a sabzi wala who has a cart and he'll be pushing it. If it's in the morning, that is the case. But if it is late in the night and you don't stay nearby, let's say a market. I mean, you don't stay nearby where sabzi walas are there. What will you do? You will probably go to the supermarket. And every time you go there, don't we see an abundance of food? Yes or no? Can I use the term saying that there is an abundance of food, right? Whatever you need, vegetables, fruits, if you need milk, if you need anything, right? Dal, rice, whatever you need, you will be able to find it. Now, we know that food is essential for us, right? We cannot survive without food. One day we cannot be like, yeah, today onwards I am not eating for the rest of time. Food is necessary for all of us. And I always say this one thing, right? I always say that food is the fuel that drives our body. Because what is there in the food? We know that there are various important nutrients which are present in my food, right? Like we have our carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals. So we need food. There is no day in which we can say that for next 3 days it's okay. I don't need food in my house, I'm going to be fine. There is no day in which we can say that, which means that food should be a constant thing that comes on our table. Now, the food that we eat is of two kinds, right? I can broadly say that the food that I eat and all of us eat can be categorized broadly into two categories. I can say that they could either be from plants, right? So, I can say that they could be plant-based food items, or I could say that they are animal-based food items, because those are food items or food products that I get from animals. So, it comes under both these categories. So, over a period of time, right, access to food, yes, you will all agree with me. Access to food has become very convenient for us. Go to vegetable bhaiya. Go to vegetable bhaiya or go to supermarket, go to chotu sa market, wherever you need. Access is easy for us. But was this always the case? Way back in time, was this always the case? Absolutely not. So earlier, early man who was there, right? Early man did not have supermarket. But early man used to depend on, let's say, feeding on what is there in and around his surrounding. So either he would pluck fruits. So early man was first of all a nomad, right? Which means that he never really settled at one point. He was always found moving from one place to another, which is why in this case, whatever he would find in his surroundings, he would eat, right? So they would make the best of what was there in their surroundings, whether it be animal-based or plant-based. But when they decided to settle down, right? That is what is important. When they decided to settle down at one point. So when they decided to settle down and no longer go from one place to another, we saw that this was the origin of agriculture. Because now they cannot just keep depending at one point, whatever is there in their surroundings, they cannot, only keep eating that. They need more and more food. Which is why in this particular case, what do we see? We see that this was the advent of agriculture, or this is when agriculture started. Because they decided that I will grow my own food. So first it started from growing, let's say started growing with plants. Then they decided and they domesticated animals. So when they domesticated, what do I mean by domesticated? It means that they decided to tame some animals. So then they started to grow or rear animals and they started to obtain food, right? So over a period of time, yes, over a period of time, what happened? we saw that there was a rising importance of agriculture. So what is agriculture? Agriculture is a branch, right? It is a branch or a science and practice of growing crops, right? Growing crops by cultivating them on a piece of land. Or another way that I say is agriculture is the large scale production of crops and livestock that is necessary for us, right? So now we've understood how important agriculture is. And we know from our lower grades, we have had an entire chapter that has told us about how agriculture takes place, right? So we know that to do agriculture, various steps are involved. And when we talk about this term agriculture, our country is an agricultural country, right? Now, why do I say India is an agricultural country? Because if you think about it, a large percentage of the population, right? A large percentage depends on agriculture for their livelihood. That means many people in our country are actually farmers, right? And along with that, what do we see? We see that along with this, to feed our population also, right? To feed all the people in our country, we need to do agriculture. Yes or no? We all need to do agriculture to feed the people in our country. And in our country as well, we see that we have a lot of geographical advantages. Very good, Astha. We have a lot of geographical advantages. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, our country, if you look at it, is very diverse. Different parts of the country have different kinds of soil, different types of climatic conditions. We see that the topography, the layout of the country is very different. And along with that, we also have various ways in which we irrigate our lands. Now, along with this, we also see that light is a very important factor because we see that different plants that are there, right? We see that different plants, in order for them to grow, require different amounts of sunlight, right? And we call that as the photo period. This is a very important term that is mentioned in your textbook. Yes? What is photo period? It is related, or it is how long of sunlight, what is the duration of sunlight, let's say a particular piece of land or a particular crop gets, right? So we see that this right here is related to duration of sunlight, right? So we understand that different parts of our country have this. And along with this, we see that different crops, in order to cultivate them, also require different soil types, climatic conditions, topography, irrigation, so on and so forth. So simply based on different climatic conditions, we can categorize our crops into 3 categories. What are the 3 categories? Can you quickly tell me? Yes, what are the 3 categories in which I can categorize my crops? Now we know that broadly we can categorize it as Kharif crops, Rabi crops, and Zaid crops, right? So Kharif crops that are there are basically those crops which are sown during the monsoon season. So we see that they are sown during June time, right? And of course they are harvested around September, October time. Yes, and we see that they are often called as monsoon crops, right? So we see that rice, maize, soybean, groundnuts, these are all examples of the same, right? Next up we have Rabi crops. Now Rabi crops that are there are called as winter crops, which means that they are sown around October, November time, right? And we see that they are harvested, that means they are fully cultivated around, let's say, Jan, Feb, March time, right? Winter crops. So in this case, wheat, gram, pea, mustard are all examples of the same. Now last but not the least, we have Zaid crops. Now what are Zaid crops? Zaid crops are summer crops. Now summer crops are those which are sown between your March to May time, right? Short period of time, unlike your Kharif and Rabi, which are long period. We see that cucumber, pumpkin, tomato, bitter gourd, they are all examples of the same. Now, if you see, so far what we have discussed has just been a refresher of some of the concepts we have learned from our lower grades, right? But if you look at it, naturally, aren't they dependent upon some climatic conditions, right? We see that they are all dependent upon some climatic conditions. Now, if this is the case, over a period of time, we have seen that our population is increasing, right? Population number is increasing. So if this is how much food one person eats and this is how much a family eats over a period of time in a state or in a country or in a world, right? We see that there is large amount of food that is being consumed, right? So as the population increases, there is an increasing demand for the food as well. So now let's assume that we are, maybe practicing agriculture in this piece of land and I need more food. Now will my logic be that, okay, more food means more land that I need for agriculture? Can I use this logic, which means that if I need more food, I will use, or I need more land, right? More land, so that in more amount of land, I will be able to cultivate more of my crops. Can I use that logic? Now, if I use that logic, let's take the example of our country. If I use that logic and I say, okay, I want more land, where am I going to get this land from? I have to go attack my papa forests, right? First of all, the forest population over a period of time has been, the numbers have been coming down and down and down. Now at this point, if we end up cutting more trees, right? We clear more trees, we clear out more of those forests, we will get a very big issue, right? So increasing agriculture will cost us our forests, and we see that loss of forests can cause climate change, floods, loss of biodiversity, and at this point it is going to be a very important problem, right? Because at this point we can't afford this. Climate change is already at its brink, so we cannot afford to cut or get more land from forest. So now we are at another problem. Now I need to grow more food. Nothing is going to stop me from that. I still need to grow more food, but I cannot get more land. Then what can I do? Right? I cannot get more land. So my only way in which I can do this is to use my land effectively, right? It is to use my land effectively, that whatever land I have, I use it to my best. No point in complaining that I'm not going to get more land, right? So this was the idea way back in the 1960s, that okay, we are not going to be able to get more land. So what did people do? People decided, or they started to use some methodologies where they found that the amount of crops that they could grow in one single piece of land, they're like, okay, let's double their number, right? So they started to produce improved crops, right, which were high yielding. That means that in every small area of land, crops were grown effectively. And why did they do this? They do this to increase the productivity, so that in my chuntu piece of land also, I will get more and more crops, right? Now this process is what we knew as green revolution. But there was a very big problem here. Here, in order to do green revolution, what they saw that there was massive, right? We saw that there was massive use of natural resource, right? So massive use of natural resources. Now earlier in those days, they were like, yay, we can do this. We can see that green revolution is possible. But, or the advent of green revolution, we saw that agriculture was happening. We were able to meet the demand for food. But what happened? We saw that it was consuming way too many natural resources. So because it was taking so many natural resources, on the long run, is this advisable? Is this advisable that we keep using natural resources, but nothing is going, there is no, adverse effect, right? Or nothing is going to happen to us. Can I say that? Yes or no? No. If I keep using my natural resource, what is going to happen? It is going to deplete it, right? And in a longer run, it is not sustainable. Which is why there are these issues that we will learn about. We need to increase food production, but we cannot overuse our natural resource, right? Which means that I need to be sustainable. I need to have sustainable practice. Now, along with this, right, I need to have access to food. Now, you imagine I came up with some sustainable practice, but it's too expensive for me to use, right? Imagine that I am spending thousands, let's say lakhs and lakhs of money in order to, sustainably grow some plants, right, or grow some crops. But now, if I am spending lakhs and lakhs of rupees, can I sell it for 20 rupees and 30 rupees? Will I make profit as a farmer? No, na. Will I make profit? Imagine, I am spending lakhs and lakhs of rupees, but I will sell for 20 rupees. Am I making any profit? No. Then what will I have to do? In order to get the money back, at least if I've invested so much money, I should get that money back, no? So what will I do? I will maybe charge it at a higher price. Maybe instead of giving 20 rupees per kg, I may give it at 100 rupees per kg. Now will all people buy it at 100 rupees per kg? There are some people who cannot purchase that food, right? Which means that people will not have access to food, right? So we see that food security gets affected. Because you see, food security that is there. This term, food security, is dependent on two things. It is not just on availability. See, one is that people should have food, right? There should be availability of food. But apart from that, people should also be able to afford it, right? People should also be able to afford it, which is why in this case, what do we need? We need to have one, on an economic level, people's income should be increased, but apart from that, find methodologies wherein we are able to tackle the demand, right? So, how do we do this, or how do we increase the yield of crops? So, in order to understand the rest of the chapter, you need to understand the problem statement, right? You need to know what the problem statement is. Otherwise, there is no way in which you are going to understand the remaining chapter. Now, over a period of time, there is some data given in your textbook, right? Between 1952 to, let's say, 2010, we saw that there was only 25% of, so somehow they increased the land, okay, some forests were cut and all that, but they increased the cultivatable land or the cultivable land by 25%. But they achieved a 4x production. That means even though amount of land did not increase considerably, they increased cultivation 4 times. So we are going to understand how we increase the yield. But before we understand this, let me quickly tell you what is yield, right? So yield can be defined as the amount harvested or amount of crops that are harvested per unit area of land. Easy? Are we all clear? Are we all clear what is a yield? Because the term yield is something that I will be repeating once again. Yes? So have we understood so far? See, Anj Bacha, I know you have a lot of doubts, but see, I will come to grade 8 and I will teach you all of this. If you keep spamming here, now it will be difficult. I will be taking agriculture chapter for geography very soon, requesting you that when I do that, then I will teach you that, okay? So green revolution did have an adverse effect. Yes, it did have an adverse effect because see, your high yielding varieties that were introduced, right, required a lot of fertilizer, required a lot of water, which means that your fertilizers were then destroying your quality of soil. Yes, we've learned about it. So that's why green revolution did have some, negative impacts as well, okay? No problem, Asta, no problem, it's okay. Yes, last concept is basically that even though land was less, we were able to grow more. It's as simple as that. Now, I will quickly, Sonu and many others who are having all sorts of conversations in class, if you're going to continue, I will block you, right? Or else you pay attention in class. Or else you leave the class and come back watch it later. But don't disturb my class, please. Being very kind to all of you. Okay, thank you so much. Siri, I am going to explain that. I will teach you genetic manipulation. I will teach you genetic engineering. I will teach you all of it. Mannat, ma'am, it's 2014. From 2014. Oh, okay. ठीक है. So how do we do this? Right? How are we going to do this? Now, how will I improve my yield without really, increasing my percentage of land? Right? So in this case, how do I do it? There are 3 ways. I can either make sure that the choice of seeds that I am planting, right? The type of seed that I'm choosing, I can choose higher quality seeds, or I can make better quality seeds, and thereby I can improve the variety of the crop, right? Or else what can I do? Along with that, I can also produce my crops, right? There can be crop production management where I adopt farming techniques, right? Farming techniques that will help me get better crops. Or along with that, I can also implement some protection techniques, right? So whatever crops that I am growing at the end of the day are protected from unwanted harmful substances. So that way today we will understand what is crop variety improvement, crop production management, and crop protection management. Yes? Are we clear? Are we all clear? These are the agendas for today. Now on an examination point of view, this is super duper important. Okay? Lot of questions will come from this particular topic, which is why I need you all to pay attention for this topic that I'm about to explain. Awesome. Crop variety, crop production, you will understand, Charles. Is sequence important? Better that you have the sequence first. Because see, the first topic is going to be talking about producing high quality seeds. And every crop or every plant starts as a seed. Hence, understanding this is something necessary. Don't worry, Ayushi, we will sort all that out. Now, what does the first subtopic say or the first methodology say? It is crop variety improvement, which means what? We need to first know what the name variety means, right? So here we are going to come across some terminologies, okay, later on as well, which is why I will tell you a certain sequence, right? I am going to tell you a certain sequence, okay? Let me not draw the triangle, that's a maybe. Okay, we are going to understand an important sequence. Now, if you look at the world, now this is some foundation concept that you need to know to understand the remaining chapter, right? So pay attention to this part. Now here, as you all know, we see that we have our earth, right? Now in our earth, now this is not with respect to crops, I'm talking about in general. Now in our earth, we see that we have so many living organisms. We have plants, we have animals, we have, microorganisms. We have so many different kinds of living organisms, right? Which is why we saw that in order to study these living organisms, we needed to find a way to group them, right? Group them so that it becomes easier to study them as groups rather than studying them individually. Because think about it. Individually, will you sit and learn about 8.5 billion, living organisms that are there? No, right? Nobody has time. And I'm sure it will take years and years to study them. Which is why, what do? We will group them, right? So we will group them based on some similarities and we will differentiate them based on some differences. So what are we doing them? We are grouping them. Based on what? Based on similarities, right? Simple. Think of it as how you are all in houses, right? All of you are in different houses in school. You'll have red house, green house, blue house, purple house, all these houses are there. Now you're all grouped into that. So think of that as organisms being grouped the same way. Now there are various levels at which they get grouped, okay? So we see that there is a species level, there is a genus level, right? Then we see that there is at a family level, at a class level. So we see that there are various levels, right? So what do we call them as? We call them as hierarchy of grouping, right? So we call them as hierarchy in grouping. Are we all clear? Okay. So now in this case, what do we see? We have genus, we have, oops, sorry about that. We have species, we have genus, family, we have order, we have class, right? Then we have phylum and we have kingdom, okay? Now this particular chapter was deleted from your syllabus, which is why this is going to be a little difficult. Now you don't need to know all of this at this point, okay? You don't need to know all of this. But you do need to know two things. You need to know species level and you need to know genus level. Then you need to know at something called as variety also, right? So what do we mean by this? Let's understand. Now, at a kingdom level is when organisms are broadly grouped, right? For example, kingdom Animalia. That means all animals are under kingdom Animalia. Or Plantae. where all plants are under kingdom Plantae. So that's a very upar ka classification. But later on, as we go, they will get fine-tuned, right? They will become smaller and smaller and smaller. And at this level, where it reaches species, right? We see that these are organisms which have maximum similarity, right? So a species can be defined as a group of organisms that has maximum similarity, right? And can produce fertile organisms. Now, what do I mean by this? That means that if organisms of the same species, right? Let's assume we have species 1 and we have, let's assume we have 1 and 2, right? We have 1 and we have 2 of the same species. When they produce or when they come together and reproduce, they will produce an offspring, right? They will produce a baby, which also can reproduce in the future. So, for example, human beings come under the category of Homo sapiens. Now, sapiens is what is called as the species. So, every organism which is a Homo sapien, everybody in sapien species can come together, reproduce and give a fertile offspring, right? Are we clear? For example, another one has Panthera leo, right? Panthera leo that is there is with respect to lion. Now when Panthera leo will, when Panthera leo will, find a female Panthera leo or a lioness, it will give rise to baby cubs that can eventually go on, right? So in this case, what do we see? We see that in this particular case, a species are a group of organisms that have maximum similarity and can produce fertile offsprings. Why fertile? Fertile because they need to reproduce or continue their generation. Now if you see, we have Panthera here. I told you Leo or Sapien is the species. But we have something called as Panthera, Homo. We are using all these terms, right? This right here is what we will call as the genus level. Now genus is below or one step below species. That means that they don't have maximum similarity. Slightly lesser similarities, right? So they all belong to the same genus. For example, Panthera tigris. What is Panthera tigris? It is tiger. But a lion and a tiger are drastically different from each other. But nonetheless, they also have similarities, which is why we see that they belong to a broader category called as genus. Now, if you look at a, if you look at it in this manner, we see that they belong to the same genus. But if they come together, they may not produce a fertile offspring, right? So we see that they may not produce a fertile offspring. So these are two terminologies that you need to understand. So are you clear what is a species and what is a genus? Because if you are clear with what is species and genus, one can't understand genus. Think of genus as if this is my species, right? Species may maximum level. Now they have maximum similarity here. Maximum. But still some slight differences can exist. That is what I come to be. There could be a broader group, right? Which includes organisms of different species. So this is a group which has organisms of different species, okay? But they have some slight differences, but they're all grouped together. So for example, you have lion, right? You have lion, you have tiger, you have, your leopard, so on and so forth, right? So in this case, if you think about it, they all have some common characteristics, common features. They have those whiskers, they have, the kind of, the kind of diet that they follow, the kind of, patterns in their eyes. They have so many common ones, right? But still, too many differences. So in this case, what do we see? They come under a broader category, which is called as Panthera, which we will call as genus. So it's basically genus is a group of species. Simple, exactly. So genus can be defined as a group of species. So now that we have understood what is genus and species, right? We see that a plant variety is something we see further from species. So we had genus, we had species, and we see that then we have variety. So within, right? So we see that within a group of species, if let's say we have a group of plants, right? Let's assume we have a group of plants that have a common characteristic. We call them as a plant variety. Now this forms the basis of understanding the remaining bit that we are about to learn. Yes? Now why are we learning so much? Ma'am, itna sab, why you are teaching? I mean, what is the point of learning all of this? That is because if you see, right, even though there are various people who are involved in the field of agriculture, we see that there are some crop problems which are faced by farmers. So we see that even though they are growing crops at a large scale, they are utilizing the land, it could be that some crops are grown with low nutritional value. You imagine, you are eating dal, your mama says eat dal, eat rice, you know. Sorry about that. You imagine your mama says, eat dal, eat rice, eat vegetables because they are rich in nutrients. But you imagine that they don't have all those nutrients that we need. Then despite eating all of those plants also, we see that we will not get the nutrition that is necessary for us. Which is why in this case, what do we see? Over a period of time, we have observed that there are some crops which are growing with low nutritional value. Then we see that sometimes crops don't grow properly because they don't have enough nutrients within them, or they get attacked with pests and insects, or the quality of seeds that come from a particular plant is not good enough. So how do we tackle all of this, right? We need to get, or our objective is that by improving the variety of the plant, right? By improving the variety of the plant, I should get something where all my plants are growing in number. The quality is very good. It is able to fend off any sort of problems, right? So imagine whether it be, pest or insect, or whether it be the fact that there's not enough land, whatever be the case, my plant is able to withstand that. My plant is able to grow faster, it is able to adapt to whatever climatic change happens, and I get what I need. Now it sounds very scary, right ma'am? You have so many demands. How are we going to get a plant, or how are we able to grow a plant that is able to achieve at least one thing or most of this, right? How can we do this? That is in two ways. I can either do it by hybridization or by genetic modification. So now we will understand the first concept, which is hybridization. Now I told you, I want something that, let's assume I want to have a pink, okay, let's assume I want a black color rose, right? I want to naturally grow a black color rose. Now naturally we will not find it, right? Naturally we will not find a black color rose. But no, I want black, which means that I need to be able to do this in such a way that I get what I want, which means I need to get something which gives me black color, and I need to have the rose of my choice, right? So here what are we talking about? Here we are looking at two characteristics, right? We are looking at two characteristics that is desirable, right? So that is desirable. What is desirable? It means that something that we look for, right? Desirable is something that we look for in a plant, right? Now let's look at it more from an agricultural point of view. Now for a farmer, he is facing so many problems, and what are we here to do? We are here to find the solution, right? Now imagine that he is having, or he wants to grow a plant, right, which has large seeds, okay? So he has a plant which he is growing that has large seeds, but if it does not have enough water, it will die, right? That means that it requires large amount of water, or you can say that they are not drought tolerant. Yes, they are not drought tolerant. So this is one plant which my farmer has. But you know what? He saw one other plant. Okay, same it is, but he saw that there is one more plant 2, which is drought tolerant. That means that it will survive in less water also. But sadly, what happened? It has small seeds. That is not what the farmer wants. He wants big seed. He wants drought tolerant also. Sounds like he's being very demanding, no? But what if there was a process where he was able to get a plant that not only had large seed, but it was also able to be drought tolerant. Now this process where he is able to achieve this is what we will call as hybridization. What is hybridization? It is the crossing of plants that are not similar or they are dissimilar. Very good, Tanushri. Very, very good, right? So as you can see, this is what is called as hybridization. Now this is simple, but how many of you have wondered, ma'am, we read the chapter, you are teaching us also, but how exactly is hybridization happening? How exactly is hybridization happening? How many of you have thought about this, right? Gamer and Kamalkant, you have earned the beautiful, opportunity to get blocked, right? So now I will be blocking you, but in the meanwhile, all the other students, give me the answer as to how hybridization might happen. Awesome, very good. Ma'am, reproduction of both seeds. Ma'am, by pollination. Okay, very good. Awesome, very good. Many of you are saying pollination, ma'am, in labs. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, by taking DNA from one plant and giving it to the other plant. Okay. Ma'am, by mixing two different qualities. Ma'am, it happens within the seed. Good questions. Good questions, right? Now, hybridization is not something that happens inside laboratories, right? Although it's a terminology that we learn about, it's quite different. So in this particular case, it happens with artificial cross-pollination. Now, what do we mean by artificial cross-pollination? We know that cross-pollination is when we take pollen grain from anther to stigma and it gets transferred, right? Now, when it happens between two different plants, we call that as cross-pollination. Yes? Now, what do I mean by artificial? That means when I am getting involved in doing this process of cross-pollination, then we call this as artificial cross-pollination, which means that I will physically, now there's a huge series of steps. I'm not going to get into it. But here basically what you do is, if I have a plant 1 which has what I need and this is my plant 2, maybe I'll take the pollen of this plant and then I will artificially pollinate this so that the seeds that I get from this may have the characteristic that I want. Now when you do this multiple times for multiple generations, then we see that this way I will be able to get what I want in the end. Ma'am, why not take disadvantage? Why would you do that, Poonam? To disadvantage you will take and then you are getting a plant which is not useful, right? So yes, Mannat, there is a chance that when you do this, disadvantages could be there. So in such cases, plants that grow with the disadvantage, they will be chopped off or they will no longer be propagated, right? So think of it in that manner. What is pollination? Pollination is nothing but transfer of pollen grain. I hope we know what this is. Pollen grain from anther to stigma, right? Now see, quickly to remind, we know that plants or for seeds to be reproduced, pollen grain is important, right? Yes, ma'am, so is hybridization done by pollen? For human beings, yes, human beings have a very important role to play. Doing good, Arjun. How are you? So is this hybridization? No. This is the process that enables hybridization. But what is hybridization? It is the crossing of genetically dissimilar. Many of you gave me answers saying, ma'am, hybridization is crossing of dissimilar plant. Any two random plant I will take and then I will get a new plant. No. It should be genetically dissimilar. That means, see, when I say genetically dissimilar, it means that at the genetic material level, there should be some slight differences. So we call it as hybridization. Now, before I go ahead with types of hybridization, are we clear so far? Are we all clear? Yes? Yes or no? Now, whoever is watching this video after the live stream, pause this video to ask yourself if you are clear. If you are, I recommend that you go ahead with the remaining chapter. Else, go back and read a little bit and then we'll go, right? Okay. Now, Vernon is the next one who looks like will get blocked very soon if you continue spamming. Now, yes, we will revise. Good, good. Neelam, not Neelam. Somebody who wants a revision, I'll do that. So now we've understood that there is crop variety improvement, right? Now how can we achieve crop variety improvement? Now I can achieve it in two ways. I can achieve it either through hybridization or I can achieve it through genetic modification, right? So I can achieve it through genetic modification. Now I told you that hybridization is what we understand as the crossing of genetically dissimilar plants, right? So it is a process of crossing genetically dissimilar plants. Now in this case, it is a process wherein let's assume I have plant 1 and I have plant 2. Now plant 1 has, let's assume, large seeds, right? This has large seeds. And let's say plant 2 has, to think about it, maybe it grows faster, right? So plant 2 grows fast. So what will I do? I will take these two plants and I will cross it, right? I will cross it in such a way that I end up getting a plant that not only has large seeds. So I have got what I wanted here, large seed. And what did I get? I got a plant which grows fast also. Now, what are my chances that I will do this? Now, it is not that at one take I will get the correct plant. I need to do this process multiple times so that end May I will get what I want, right? So that is what we mean by hybridization. Dragon Ball, if you have not understood something, you ask me your doubt, right? So ask me your doubt rather than coming to a conclusion. We are clear? Shall we move on? Ma'am, how anther goes to stigma? We are the ones. See, in artificial cross-pollination, we are the ones who will transfer it. Right, Ekam Singh? Okay. Ma'am, hybridization can happen between two different plants also. Charles, that is what we are going to learn about right now. Yes? That is what we will learn about. How can I do this hybridization? If you have told me they are genetically dissimilar, how will I choose? Can I just take any plant? Let's assume I'll take one pine tree and I'll take apple tree. Then I will cross these two things together, right? I'll go once again, don't worry. See, how we do hybridization. How will you decide which two plants you will take? That is where your types of hybridization comes, right? So your types of hybridization comes in this aspect. Now, I can do it only at certain levels. I can either do intervarietal, I can do interspecific, or I can do intergeneric. So these are our three levels, okay? Now, these are the three ways in which I can achieve it. But does not mean that I take pine tree, apple tree and cross it. No, right? Not that way. Many of you are saying, ma'am, I'll take corn and pea and cross and I'll get new plant. No. See, we see that there are various things that you have to consider. Now, even though we say that they are genetically dissimilar, they cannot be so dissimilar that they cannot produce a new organism. If they are so different from each other, they may not be able to produce a new organism, which is why we can only do it at these levels. So first we have intervarietal. Now what is intervarietal? I told you that we have genus level, we have species level, and a plant variety, right? A plant variety is one which will exist between the same species, right? That will exist between the same species. So for example, let's take an example of intervarietal. So this is same species. Now let's take the example of, let's say, Triticum aestivum. Okay. Now this Triticum aestivum is the scientific name of wheat, right? So wheat comes under Triticum aestivum. But under this we have, let's say, I'm sure we have heard of this, right? Kalyan Sona, we have heard of Sonalika wheat, right? How many of you? I'm sure you may have not heard about it. But these are all various ways, right? We see that Kalyan Sona, Sonalika are all names in which we identify wheat. Now they are all under this Triticum aestivum category only. But still, they are slightly different. Yes, we have things like Sona Masuri and all of that, right? So they are all varieties of wheat, or Sona Masuri in this case is a variety of rice. If you have not heard about it, it's okay. I'm sure that you can ask your parents. They'll tell you, oh, this wheat variety is good. Oh, this wheat variety is not so good. So that is a common term. Now, this is a variety. Now, if a cross, right? If I take, let's assume, I have wheat variety 1, right? I have wheat variety 1 and then I cross this, right? Now I cross this with wheat variety 2. So if I cross it with wheat variety 1 and wheat variety 2, they all come under Triticum aestivum. So the cross or this hybridization is happening between what? Between two varieties. So because it is happening between two, right? Between two varieties, I will call this as inter. So if you've heard about it, inter-house match. In school you would have had inter-house matches, yes or no, right? Inter-house matches. Now what are inter-house matches? Inter-house matches are those matches that happen between houses, right? Not of the same house, but it is happening between two different houses, which is why in this case we call it as inter-house match. So similarly, right, here we see that, let's say wheat variety 1. Let's assume this is Kalyan Sona and the other one is Sonalika. Now these are two varieties, but both of them come under what? Triticum aestivum. They are all of the same species, which is why in this case what do we see? We call it as intervarietal. Are we clear? Inter means between two different species or two different varieties. I hope we are all getting it now. See, remember this. It's not that complicated, right? We will send it on the Telegram channel, Ritika. I hope that's okay. Are we clear? Yes, crystal clear. Very good. ठीक है. So now we've seen that this is what is going to happen between. Inter means between two different varieties, right? Between two different varieties but of the same species. Now this could happen between two varieties of rice also, right? So two varieties of rice which comes under Oryza sativa, Oryza sativa के types varieties में जब वो आते हैं, then we call this as intervarietal. Yes? Good. No, intercropping is not this. Don't get confused. We'll get to intercropping. Learn it one by one. Now next one is when we do interspecific. Okay. Now what is interspecific? When it is between two species. Yes, two species but of same genus. Right? Two species but of same genus. Let me give you an example. Now we have Duncan grapefruit and orange, and if I take these two, I'll get Tangelo. Okay, Tangelo is an example. Now I'll tell it to you in this genus species order. Now if you think about it, we see that Citrus paradisei is Duncan fruit, which is crossed, right? Let me represent it properly, which is crossed with Citrus sinensis. Oops. Now this is grapefruit. Now this is orange. Now you don't need to remember these names. None of you need to remember these names. You don't need to know about the technical names. I am teaching this so that you are able to understand the concept. When I say intervariety, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by interspecific? That is what I mean by it, right? Okay. Ma'am, give Desi example. I'll give you 1 minute. See, can you see that this is the genus, right? This is the genus, and this right here is the species name. Okay. Now what can you understand from this? What can you understand from this? You can see that genus looks the same. Both are citrus. But species may we see that there is a difference, right? We see that there is a difference, which is why in this particular case we call it as interspecific, because it is of two different species but of the same genus, right? Very good. Tomato is also an example, right? Tomato is also an example. Very, very good. Different species, which is why we call it as interspecific. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we taking Tangelo? We see that we get the sweetness of the grapefruit and the juiciness as well, right? So, in this case, we get something that is advantageous to us. Now, what is the difference between intervariety and interspecific? Now, in intervariety, if you go back, under Triticum aestivum only we saw that there were varieties. So genus and species name are the same in all varieties. But due to slight differences, they come under different variety. Okay? Which is why that is the difference that you see. Color is also a very important difference. Very good. Very, very good. Right? So this is what we mean by interspecific. Now I'll give you one more example. Now the sugarcane I'm sure we've all seen sugarcane plant, right? We have all seen sugarcane. Yes or no? We have all seen sugarcane. Yes? Now the very good. So the sugarcane that you see right now, right? So the sugarcane plant that we see is actually a hybrid variety, right? And it is an example of interspecific hybrid, which means that right now the sugarcane that we see is a cross between Saccharum officinarum and Saccharum we have spontaneum. Now don't tell me, ma'am, you are making your own names, okay? But this is for all of us to understand, right? So here if you see, again, genus name is the same, the species is different, and what are we getting? We are getting something which is advantageous, right? Now one more example I'll give you. This example I know many of you will know. How many of you have heard about peppermint? How many of you have heard about peppermint? We have all heard about peppermint, right? Yes or no? Peppermint. So peppermint, that is there. Ma'am, tell normal names also. Normal name is sugarcane. Sugarcane ka different variety, species that we see. So this peppermint is actually a cross. This is also a hybrid. It is a hybrid of the mint species, wherein we see that water mint is crossed with spearmint to give you peppermint. Yes? So we see that the abilities of it being a medicinal herb, its taste and everything, right? That is all that comes from your peppermint as well. Tomato is also an example. Now if you think of it in liger, if you think of it, right? Even your liger. What is liger? A cross between a tiger and a lion. Now that is also interspecific, where the genus is the same. Genus is Panthera, but usme species name is different. So that is also an example of an interspecific hybridization. So I hope we are clear with this now. With the examples that we have seen, we are clear that in interspecific, the genus is the same. But what do we observe? They are of two different species. So there they are genetically dissimilar. Yes? What kind of hybridization is peppermint? It is an example of interspecific hybridization because both spearmint and your watermint, they come under the category or the genus called as mentha, right? So they come under that category. Now last that we have is intergeneric. Now see, intervarietal and interspecific are very commonly found. But intergeneric may, if you see, it is not very commonly found. Okay. Most often and not very less examples you will see under intergeneric. Because in the genus level, there is more difference, right? At least at species or variety level, we saw that more or less some kind of, similarity was there. But genus level may more and more dissimilarity comes, which means that to produce fertile offsprings or to produce organisms which can, be more continued for generation and generation becomes less, right? So if you see here, it happens between two different genuses altogether, okay? So what do we see? One example I'll give you is that of triticale, okay? This triticale is a cross between wheat and rye. So wheat here again I told you, scientific name is Triticum aestivum, while rye is Secale cereale, okay? Now here what have they done? The genus names are different, right? Here this is one genus, this is another genus, right? Which is why in this case what do we see? We see that in this particular case triticale, right? So that's why what we get is triticale. And we see that this right here is what we call as intergeneric hybridization. Are we clear? Okay. Difference between interspecific and intergeneric. Siri, intergeneric mein genus is also different. Species is different. Genus is also different. But in interspecific mein they are of the same genus but of different species, right? Okay. Are all varieties of species made by humans? No. See, some of these varieties are naturally occurring. While Kalyan, so if you look at the wheat varieties that we discussed, Kalyan Sona, Sonalika, they were all artificially made for our benefit, right? So Arvind, was made for our benefit during the Green Revolution time. Yes? Okay. Now, quickly to recall, see, I told you that species is a level, right? So see that species is a level at which we observe that all organisms, right? So these are a group basically where all organisms have maximum similarities but not completely. And what do we observe? Then we say that normally we see that they are able to reproduce to give fertile offsprings. Yes, fertile offsprings. Now there are different species, but even then we see that there will come under a broader group, right? So here they'll come under a broader group which is called as genus. Yes, so they'll come under the category of genus. So here genus includes a group where different species, when they come together, a group of different species, when they come together, they will form a genus, right? So different genuses will come together to the next level, so on and so forth, right? They'll keep getting grouped. So this is what we mean by the difference between species and genus. So now if you see, we have understood that there are three levels in which we can hybridize and get different types of plants. Now, why am I doing this? What is the advantage, right? One important thing is that end May, I am getting a plant, right? I am getting a plant which has desirable characteristics. That means by doing all of this, whether I cross two different varieties, whether I cross two different species, whether I cross two different genuses, what am I getting? I am getting an organism or I am getting a plant which has the features that I was looking for. So those are my desirable characters, right? But It is not. You always had a doubt. No, ma'am. If it is desirable, will it get accepted? So when I mean by accepted, imagine we crossed, okay? We crossed this drought tolerant plant and we crossed this plant with large seed. End May I got something which had large seed and drought tolerance. But will this particular plant continue to grow? What is the possibility that this is pakka and this will grow and this will help me? What are the chances that this is going to happen? For that, right, to understand this, you need to understand that in order for the species or the organism to continue, it needs to be also be able to survive, right? It needs to be able to produce good quality seeds. It must be it should be allowed to cultivate, right, more and more. So along with this, whatever conditions be, whether it is with respect to soil, respect to climatic conditions, amount of nutrients, you should be able to grow it. Are we clear? Lastly, before I take doubts, I'm going to quickly do this part where we're going to look at advantages, right? Now, I taught you this whole jola of hybridization, but what is the whole purpose of it? First and foremost, I want to get a plant which has higher yield, right? Which means that I should, by doing all this hybridization and getting a plant with desirable characteristics, I will end up getting plants that will get good quality seeds and will give me higher yield. That means they will grow more and more in number, right? So it will have improved quality. Now quality is not something you can say that this is what is quality. The word quality will depend from crop to crop, right? So for example, the examples that are given in your textbook, right? So for example, if we are talking about wheat, the idea of quality is that wheat should be good for baking. Or if you talk about, say, pulses, or if you talk about, oil seeds, what will be the idea of quality? Pulse may lot of protein should be there, right? Only then it will be good quality. Or in oil seeds, what do we see? We see that they should have good amount of oil. So the idea of quality differs from crop to crop, but the intent is that they should be good for use. Then of course we have this concept of resistance. What is resistance? That means to withstand, right? It is able to tolerate. So that is what we mean by resistance. It means that in different cases, right, in the nature, there could be various issues. It could be that there is not enough water, or there might be too much water, or maybe we see that, there are some insects, there are some pests attacking it. So in all of these cases, my plant should be able to survive, right? It should not be defeated easily. It should not be like one insect came and bit it and the plant is dead. No. It should have the ability to survive and withstand itself, right? So that is what we mean by biotic and abiotic resistance. Then of course we have change in maturity. Now what is change in maturity duration? That means that basically how fast my crop will harvest or how fast my crop can be used by me. You imagine, right? You imagine that there is a plant. I got plant which is, very good. Full whatever I wanted. Desirable characteristics, I got everything. But it will take 8 months for that plant to grow. You imagine, out of 12 months, 8 months that plant is growing and only after 8 months I'm able to do. And my next set, right? My next set, if I want to grow, we see that it will take another 8 months. Is that advantageous for me in any way? When it takes 9 months, or in some cases imagine one piece of land I'm able to grow only one set of crop because it is taking 12 months. As a farmer, will you think that that plant is worth growing? Yes or no? No, right? You will be like, ma'am, no. Why should I take 12 months in order to do this? Very good. So shorter the duration, if I am able to grow a plant which is shorter duration, which means instead of 8 months, I am able to grow it in 3 months. Then I can grow that same plant at least 4 times in 1 year. Thereby, I am using my piece of land very effectively, right? So thereby, change in maturity duration is more economical for me. And then of course we have wider adaptability, right? So what do I mean by wider adaptability? That means so despite all this, it should also be able to survive in the changing climatic conditions also, right? So it should be able to adapt to whatever climatic conditions. Now, not all plants, but some plants, of course. And of course, desirable agronomic characteristics. Now, this means that there are some plants which will have some favorable things, like let's assume tallness, right? So for fodder crops which are used, fodder is basically food for animals, right? So for such what do you say, if this is my need, if I want to grow a crop because I will feed it to the animal, then if that is tall, it is good for me. So that way, based on the need also, I can specify, or I can, sort of fine tune, or I can sort of, grow plants that are to my benefit. Yes? Very good. So in this case, those are the advantages. Now there is a huge paragraph given in your textbook. So please underline it. They can ask you as a 5-mark question to tell the advantages of hybridization, or why would we want to clarify or do hybridization. Yes? Now many of you are asking me, ma'am, okay, all this we did, but is it ideal, right? How long will this take? It is a long-term process. See, I told you that in order to get what I want, it is not that first go mein I take plant 1, plant 2, I cross it, or I do hybridization and I get what I need. It takes multiple crossing, right? Multiple times I need to keep doing that process so that end mein I get what I want. So it is a very time-taking process, and results are very uncertain also. See, like I said, no, sometimes you guys ask me, ma'am, what if the things that I don't want, what if all the disadvantages in that plant comes in? Then I cannot use it. That is scrap, right? So we see that, yes, exactly, in some cases, poisonous is far-fetched, right? Poisonous is far-fetched, but they will not be advantageous to us, right, Lekha? That is what we mean by this. Ma'am, but how hybridization can give higher yield? So that is a feature, right? That is something that we look for. So that is a characteristic, Mannat, that we look for. But for it to do, how will we know it will give higher yield? We have to wait for it to grow. Then we have to see if it is really happening. If it is not happening, then scrap, start again, right? So it's a long process. Photoperiod Mayar is basically the duration of how much sunlight the plant is getting exposed to, right? So that is what we mean by it. Ma'am, can it give reduced time as a result? Are you asking reduced time in terms of how less time it takes to grow? Then yes, it can give that as a result also. Yes? Okay. Ma'am, one example of hybridization. Tomato is an example of hybridization, right? Your sugarcane hybrid varieties that you see. Have you noticed some plants look big, some tomatoes and all look bigger in size, no? They'll be red tomatoes only. But how many of you have seen they look big in size, bigger than normal? Then our parents will tell, no, look at this, looks like some hybrid variety. Many of you would have noticed that some fruits will look bigger, some will look, juicier, right? Especially you have those grapes and everything. So those are all hybrid varieties that you see, which is a result of hybridization. Yes? So you see it in your day-to-day varieties. I mean day-to-day life. Sorry, not day-to-day varieties. But okay, awesome. Now if you have understood this, don't forget to hit the like button on this video, right? Do not forget to hit the like button on this video, and we will move on to the second aspect. Okay? I have not heard of it, Kamal, that is why I am not addressing it. I'll read up on that and come. Hi Neha, hello. Okay, now we shall move on to the next aspect. So now you see, they'll also be more costly. Exactly, now you know why they're more costly. Takes in a lot of effort as well, right? But now you look at it, we see that not very ideal, taking lots and lots of time, forever it is taking, right, for it to grow. So which is why we see that there is an alternative, that is genetic modification, right? Now genetic modification is very interesting, okay? Now how many of you have heard about the term GMO? Have you come across this word GMO at some point? I'm sure you would have, right? We would have all heard the word GMO at some point. Now the term GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. That means that by this process of genetic modification, right, we see that in an organism, I am modifying right? I am modifying the genetic material. Now we know what is genetic material, right? So genetic material is basically all the genetic information. So if an organism has to be a certain way, all that information is present in the genetic material. Now the genetic material only I am modifying, or that information only I am going to modify such that my plant is able to survive. Hence I call it genetic modification. Let's understand this with an example. Now brinjal, as we all know, is a very important plant, right? It's very, very important because a lot of nutrition is obtained from brinjal. But what happened was that brinjal as a plant can be easily attacked by pests. Okay, normally if you grow brinjal, it can be easily attacked by pests. Now what are pests? Pests are unwanted organisms, right? So they are unwanted insects, or they are insects that are harmful to the plant, right? So they can be easily attacked by pests. Now what will happen? People will go and they'll be like, okay, if pests are coming, their solution is go spray chemicals. Spray chemicals that will get rid of my pests, or that will get rid of my insects. So they've gone and they've sprayed it extensively. But what happens, no? Although we end up using these pesticides or these chemicals, we get rid of the pests and we are getting high yield. That means that more number of brinjal I am getting. But am I also not getting plants, or am I also not getting brinjal that has a lot of chemicals in it? And if I consume all that chemicals, isn't that harmful for me? Yes, you will all agree that, ma'am, if I consume the brinjal that has so much of chemical sprayed on it, it is not good for me. It is actually harmful for me. So now they realize that, okay, it is going to be a problem, right? We cannot continue doing this. So how do we tackle this, right? How do we tackle this? That is where genetic modification comes into the picture. Now what they observed was there was a certain kind of microorganism, right? There was a kind of bacteria which is called as Bacillus thuringiensis, right? You don't need to know the name of this, right? You don't need to know name and spelling. This is extra information. Now on doing some research, they saw that in soils which had this Bacillus thuringiensis, no? We saw that all those pests that either was found eating that soil or found living on it, we saw that they all died. They all died. The reason being that this particular bacteria, no, it produces a protein, okay? It produces a protein. Now this protein, when this bacteria is taken in, or when this protein is consumed, let's assume that this protein is produced, right? Once it enters into the insect's body, right? Once it enters into the insect's body, it will act as a toxin. It will act as a poisonous substance. And what will happen? It will kill the insect. So then we saw that this information for the protein was found in a gene, right? It was found in a gene. Now what is a gene? Gene is basically a fragment of DNA that codes for a particular protein, or maybe a set of genes will code for a protein. But to simplify the information, I'm just going to say a gene is a fragment of DNA that codes for a particular protein, right? And we see that this right here, let's assume if this is my DNA, then this part of it will, let's say, code for protein A, right? So this part of it will code for protein A, and this protein A will have some function. So people thought, right? Imagine if the brinjal plant was able to produce the same protein as the bacteria. You think about it, right? Don't you think that this particular brinjal, if it was able to produce that same protein, and if that happens, and when this, pest comes and attacks my brinjal, then, on eating one bite of it only, it will die. So they realized that this was one way. So what they did, they took this particular gene right? They took this particular gene from the bacteria and they inserted it into the brinjal. So what have they done? They have modified the genetic material. Now, methodologies implemented to do this is what we call as genetic engineering, right? So genetic engineering, or the field of genetic engineering, includes all of these techniques that enable genetic modification, right? Now, genetic modification happens in multiple ways. So there are multiple techniques also. This is just one technique that we are learning about. But if you aspire to do more on this, you can definitely take up biotechnology as a field. Trust me, this is going to be very, very interesting. So now what do we see? We see that we have inserted this into the brinjal. So we have taken genes from the bacteria and inserted it into the genetic material of the plant. Now naturally what has happened? The brinjal itself is able, right? So we see that the brinjal in itself is able to produce that protein. So when the pest attacks it, it will die. Now what happens is that this particular toxin, many of you are asking me, ma'am, won't it have an impact on us also? Now there is a lot of debate happening on this, okay? It's not like it is full and final. There's still a lot of debate happening, but the argument given from their end is that the toxin will get activated only inside the insect's body or the pest's body because of the kind of nature, the chemical nature inside the pest's body or the insect's body is very different from, let's say, in human body. So that is why that toxin will act only on pests and not insects. But it is too early to say anything, but this is something that you need to understand, right? So here we see that genetic modification takes place in this manner, and such kind of modified genetic, this kind of genetic modification where we use our Bacillus thuringiensis, we call such brinjal as BT brinjal. Name is suna hua, very common, we've all heard this BT brinjal name, right? This is not new to us, we've read it in the paper. Yes, we've all learnt about it. So BT brinjal, BT cotton, they are all modified with the help of Bacillus thuringiensis, bacteria. But along with that, we also see that golden rice is an example of a genetically modified organism. Now the intent of golden rice was that we introduce certain genes from other microbes that will increase the vitamin A in rice. So this was one such methodology that was there. Yes, golden rice for production of vitamin A. So these are all examples of genetic modification. So what is genetic modification? When a desirable gene, so same thing, when a desirable gene or a favorable gene is added to the genetic material of a crop, right? So when it is added to the genetic material of the crop, what do we call it? We call this as genetic modification, and such crops are known as genetically modified organisms. Yes? So are we clear? Are we all clear? Because with this, everybody, if you see, we have completed the toughest part of the chapter, I would say, which is crop variety improvement, right? Crop variety improvement is something that takes a long time to understand. The remaining bits of the chapter is relatively easy. See, like I said, today's class will go on. It's a one-shot class. And I can always, simply teach and go. There is no point if you're going to watch this video later also, which is why I'm taking my time and I'm going to explain this to all of you. We will take breaks in between as well so that you understand. Or else, because the existing one-shot, of course, we see that although it is more or less of the same explanation, I'm sure that it will take you a bit of time, right? Are we all clear? Okay, very good, all of you, very, very good. I can see that many of you are clear. BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis, right? Okay, ma'am, what does code mean in a gene? See, in a genetic material, right, if you look at the structure of the DNA, we see that there are these 4 nitrogenous bases, okay, which is called as ATGC. Right? So this information that I keep telling is based on this combination of A, T, G, C, in what arrangement they are there. So that forms the genetic code. Yes? Okay. Awesome that all of you are clear. Poonam, I am going to take at least 1 hour minimum to finish this off. Okay. How about we take a 5-minute break right now? Let's take a quick 5-minute water break and come back. Yes? 5-minute water break and we will come back for the remaining half of it, right? 5 minutes. See, today's class will run late, I know, but if you stay with me, this chapter is over in 1 day, right? You don't need to think about it later. So 5 minutes may we will come back and we will discuss the remaining bits of it. Yes, 10th graders, I will bring everything. So see you by 10:05. Okay. Okay, everyone, we are back. Very quickly, can you all tell me if my audio, my video, everything is heard, everything is good to go, so that I can quickly go ahead? Yes, on time, and we'll get started. But before I move into the next aspect of it, we have a quick question. So for students watching this video much later, please everybody go ahead and pause the video and give me the answer. Which among the following is which is not a GMO? We have golden rice, bacillus species, BT cotton or BT brinjal. You have 30 seconds to give me the answer for the same and your time starts now. So very quickly, we know that when we talk about a genetically modified organism, it means that the genetic material has been modified, or we have introduced a desirable gene such that we are able to get a modified organism, right? So in this particular case, what do we observe? Very good, very good. All of you have given me the answers and we know this, right? So in this case, we know that the answer is option B, bacillus species, because all of these three are examples of GMO, while this right here is not an example. So with this, of course, I mean, I've already checked with you for a doubt board, but I think we are clear, right? All concepts are clear. We don't need any explanation once again. I'm sure that in case if you have any doubts, I will keep clarifying as and when, but I guess most doubts I have answered as and when I have explained. Yes? Okay. Now we will move on to the second aspect of it, which is going to be crop production management. Yes? See, now what did we see? We saw that one is I make good quality seeds. Okay. I make good quality seeds and then I leave it up saying, okay, my seeds are good. I'll get higher adaptability. All is well and good. But the next one is that apart from just, right? Agriculture is not just about sowing the seed and leaving it to God and saying, yes, it will grow and it is going to be fine. But rather, we know that agriculture requires a lot of techniques involved as well, right? We know that there are various steps involved in agriculture. Yes. Now, if you think about it, this production management, in order to understand how this is different from variety, let's take an example. Yes. Let's take an example of farmer A and farmer B. Right? Now here if you look at it, we have farmer B. Now he is a little more well off, right? Farmer A is a little more well off because he has a larger area of land. We see that he has agricultural tools, right? We see that he has agricultural tools. Maybe he has access to some money, which means that he can, buy fertilizer, so on and so forth, right? So we see that he has access to maybe various technology. While in some cases, let's say in this farmer's case, right, farmer B, he does not have that much money to invest, which is why maybe he has relatively a smaller piece of land. He might not have money to depend on agricultural tools and technologies. Yes, and as a result, what do we observe? We see that there will be a drastic differences in their production. So based on what they have access to, we see that there will be a drastic production in different farmers, right? Between farmer A and farmer B. So even if I give the same hybrid seeds, right? Let's assume I give both the same hybrid seeds to farmer A and farmer B. He may or may not be able to cultivate to his best because farming techniques also have a very important role to play, right? Which is why production practices, right? The farming production practices also need to be at different levels so that it can cater to the farmer, right? So imagine you have a group where some people can do this, some people can do this, and some people can do this. How will you efficiently use these three groups? If you cater to what they will need, which means that imagine there is one group which has a boat, okay? And here nobody can, imagine there is a group wherein no one can swim, right? There is one where some know floating. Then there are advanced swimmers, right? We have advanced swimmers. Now imagine they are all going boating. But there is only one, senior, let's say, lifeguard or life coast or whatever they call. I call it lifeguard. One junior one. That's it. So what will you do? Here, you will assign it based on the need. So senior lifeguard has to be with people who cannot swim so that he can take good care of them. Junior lifeguard can be with people who can float because they can still manage on their own. While people who are advanced swimmers, what do we see? We see that in this particular case, we can see that they will be able to manage on their own, right? So similarly with production also, we can see that this can go, which is why production can be of two kinds. There can be a no-cost production, there can be a low-cost production, and there could be a high-cost production. And these are different levels based on how much, what is the financial conditions that are there, right? So from here, what is our objectives, right? What is our objectives from crop production management? So here we will focus on the production techniques, right? More with respect to those steps. So we want to get high yield, that we will not compromise. But we will try to do it with less investment and with low maintenance. The less minimal effort we are able to put and the less effort we put, if we are able to get higher yield, well and good. So how can we achieve this? Now this depends on three factors, right? Production in itself depends on three factors. It depends upon how we make sure we manage our nutrients, how we provide water to the soil, and what is the cropping technique that we use, okay? So based on this, let's understand this one by one. First up is nutrient management. Now see, no matter what plant you grow, soil should have nutrients, right? Just like how in the food that we eat, we are eating it because we are getting nutrients from it, from which we are able to utilize them for growth, development, so on and so forth. Even plants need nutrients. Now these nutrients are normally present in the soil, and some of these elements are found in the air and water, right? So carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, all that is what we find in air and water. But in soil, what do we see? In soil we see that we have macronutrients, or nutrients which are present in large amounts, right? So we see that there are nutrients which are present in large amounts, like your or that is needed, not present in soil, but is needed by the plant in large amounts. So we call them as macronutrients, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, so on and so forth. While some that is necessary in smaller amounts, right? They are used in smaller quantities by the plant. So your iron, manganese, zinc and all of that, they are called as micronutrients because we see that they are needed in smaller amounts, right? So now what will happen? This is very, very necessary. But if I am going to continuously, right? If I am going to continuously keep using my soil, will these nutrients always be there in the soil? Yes. Will the nutrients always be there in the soil? Imagine you remember, right? I told you that if I'm able to grow the same crop at least 4 times, right, in the same piece of land, don't you think all my nutrients will get utilized? Same crop, taking same amount of nutrients, it is getting, it is taking up all those nutrients, which means that by the time I reach the 4th time, my soil will not have enough nutrients. So there will be a deficiency of nutrients, right? So we see that there will be a deficiency. And as a result, what will happen? If there is a deficiency, it will affect the growth of the plant, which is why we see that now the plant that I'm growing, even if high quality seed, it will not be good, right? So plant will again be, malnourished and it will not be able to grow to its fullest, which is why we see that we use certain supplements, right? What do we use? We use supplements. What do I mean by supplements? It means that they are added to the soil, right? It is added. Now what can I add? I can add manure, I can add fertilizer. Now what are manures, right? We know that manure is obtained from organic matter. Yes, so basically derived from solid fecal animal waste, right? And we see that they are natural and it is normally prepared by the process of decomposition. Now what is decomposition process? Decomposition process is normally done by, microorganisms that are found in soil, right? So in my soil, if you see, we will find some microorganisms, okay? We will find some microorganisms. Now these microorganisms have the ability to break down complex organic substances into simple organic substance, right? Now this is what effectively forms the nutrients in soil. That means that more and more nutrients are there. We say that soil is fertile. Now, in the case of manure, what do we observe? In the case of manure, we see that this right here is organically obtained, so it has a lot of advantage, right? So we see that because it is naturally obtained, we see that it has the ability to, if you mix manure with the soil, the soil will have better ability to hold the water. It will also, make sure that more water can be absorbed. It has more number of friendly microbes. It makes the soil texture better, enhances the soil or improves the quality of soil. So here manure has good advantages, but it also has some disadvantage, and the only disadvantage I would tell you is that it will not have a fixed amount of nutrients. Now you're getting it from a natural source, right? Now you cannot say that from this I want exactly 25 grams of nitrogen, right? Or I want to have 5 milligrams of iron. You cannot be highly specific with what you want. It's naturally obtained, which means that whatever you get is whatever you add into the soil. So that is something which is not fixed. Now here, this right here is going to be very, very important to understand, right? Now understand that manure is ecologically obtained. Now we also have something. So let me go back to the previous slide because I think I have space. Yes. Now one very important point that you need to know is there is manure, but we also hear about the term compost as well. Now, is manure and compost the same, or is manure and compost different? Now, they do have their slight differences. Manure is mainly obtained from your animal excreta. That means it is obtained from the animal waste that we get. Cow dung and so on and so forth are examples of manure. While compost, on the other hand, is normally from plant-based, right? So here we see that they are mainly plant-based in this case. So here, if you see, the term compost is again obtained by the process of decomposition, but we see that a lot of plant-based materials is what is utilized for getting compost. And again, the nutrient composition in manure, so the kind of nutrients you will find in manure, kind of nutrients you will find in compost might be slightly different. So that is one point that you need to understand. So with this, we have understood that there is manure, there is compost, but we also have something called as vermicompost, right? So we see that we have vermicompost. Now I told you that for compost to be formed, what are we using? We are using farm waste, right? Or vegetable waste. Or you can say sewage waste, whatever it be. Now in this case, when I use this for composting, yes, but to get this compost, if I also use earthworms, right? If I also use earthworms, then I will call this process, or I will call this as vermicompost, right? So on using earthworms, I am fastening my process of making compost. Now how does this happen? Now normally when we are doing this whole composting process, red earthworms are added to it. And these red earthworms, what they do is they ingest all of this, right? They ingest all this waste material into their body. And when they ingest it and they take it inside their body, they will break it down within their body and they will excrete. Whatever waste is there, they will give it out. Now what happens during this process? No, this whatever they give out or whatever they excrete, that is actually necessary, or that is very rich in nutrients, right? So that is one point that you need to understand here. Now on the other hand, those are basically techniques, Sky, bokashi, composting and all of that are techniques of composting, right? So that is one thing that you need to understand here. Now one more point that they have told you about, which many of us cannot seem to comprehend, is green manure. Ma'am, you told me manure, okay. You told me compost, okay. You told me vermicompost, okay. But what is this term that is green manure, right? What do we mean by it? Now, green manure that we see is a kind of, I would say, cropping, okay, wherein before you actually grow the crops, you will maybe grow some green plants, right? So you will grow some plants like maybe sun hemp, right? So you will grow plants like sun hemp, or you will grow guar, which are grown. So if this is my particular land, and let's assume that I want to grow this plant. But before I grow this, I'll grow these chuntu plants, right? And what will I do? Once I grow, I can leave them as is, or I can remove them and I can mulch them. That means I will flatten it and mix it with the soil. So what will happen? We see that when I do this, these sunhem, guar and all of that, we see that they will end up enriching the soil with nitrogen and phosphorus. So here if you see, right, this is not decomposed. This is undecomposed, right? And we see that by growing green, that's why the term green manure is there. Yes, green manure that is there is basically undecomposed green material that is grown prior to actually growing your main crop, that is grown such that it can eventually be mulched with the soil, right? That means I'll mix it with my soil as is and then I will end up using it. So that provides my nutrient. Yes? Normally, apart from this, even your leguminous plants are grown, right? Okay. Ma'am, will green manure contain animal excreta? No. It will mainly consist of your plants, right? So, green manure is mainly your plants that are there. So, like sun hemp and various other, beans plant. These are all examples of the same. Yes? So, are we clear of what is green manure? Think of green manure as the plants you will grow in a piece of land before growing your real crop, right? If this is my real crop, I will grow these sun hemp, assuming I grew sun hemp, okay? There'll be micro plants or there'll be small plants. Then what I will do is, I will not wait for it to be decomposed or broken down. I will take it and then I will mix it with my soil. So that eventually what happens, when it undergoes that process of decomposition, it enriches the soil with nutrients. Yes, so that is what we mean as green manure. Now, this is all about using natural or eco-friendly ways. But let's assume that if, let's say the farmer has some capital, right? Has some amount of money and can purchase and, wants to cultivate at a larger scale. Then he can use fertilizers, right? So if you see, fertilizers that are there are obtained or they're inorganic substances. Unlike your manure and compost and everything which are organic, these are inorganic, right? So these are inorganic chemical substances that are manufactured. So we see that these are manufactured in the factories. So we see that these are manufactured in the factories. And again, in this case, very important point that you need to understand is that the amount of nutrients that are there, right? They are fixed. Now, these are grown, these fertilizers are produced, they are produced at a commercial scale, which means at a large scale. Then along with that, we also see that, they have a fixed amount of nutrients like your nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. Now here we see that fertilizers that are there, because they have a fixed amount of nutrients, will give you high yield, right? But like I said, it is for farmers who can bear the cost. So it is a high costing farming technique. Remember this, it is a high costing farming technique. So some examples are, your NPK, which is an example, urea is an example of fertilizer, and even superphosphate is an example for the same, right? Is manure expensive on the other hand? No, it is inexpensive. Animal excreta like cow dung and everything, you just got to dry it and use it. So relatively lower cost when compared to your fertilizer. What are the advantages? See, because the number of nutrients are fixed, soil fertility is ensured. It's easy to store, it is portable, right? And will give you high yield, right? But you know that the fertilizers bear a cost. Fertilizers that are there come with a cost, because if you use it as on a large scale, it is a very short scale solution, right? Or I will say it is a short term solution. So on the long scale, what would be a better approach? We know that if you keep using it for a long period of time, it will reduce the soil fertility, it will cause water pollution, because all that whatever runoff from the agricultural fields are there, they will go to the water, and eventually what will happen? It will cause water pollution, and in some cases it could be injurious to health, because when you spray fertilizers and everything, it is ingested by the body. So again, not good for our health as well, which is why we see that two ways of tackling it is by doing organic farming, right? So what is organic farming? Organic farming is a methodology, right? It's a completely different agricultural approach where you do not use any chemicals whatsoever, right? So we can promote organic farming because again, no use of chemicals. And here maximum input of, we see that there is maximum input of organic manure. So we see that there is organic manure getting involved. Apart from that, we see that in order to make this manure, you can use recycled farm waste, you can use various microorganisms, you can use neem leaves, which acts naturally, right? Which naturally acts as a pesticide. So a lot of natural alternatives are available to what we use chemically, whether it be a fertilizer, whether it be a pesticide as well, which is why organic farming is recommended. So in this case, what do we see? An organic farming is a system, or it's a farming methodology where we use organic substitutes, right? So like organic manure, using recycled farm waste, microbes which can act as biofertilizers, and use proper cropping techniques, and use neem leaves as biopesticides. So that is our input from organic farming, right? So now with this, do you understand how nutrient management comes into the picture? Yes, blue-green algae is used for the preparation of biofertilizers. That is the example given in your textbook. Yes. So are we clear? Are we all clear with nutrient management? That is one bit of your crop production. But this is very important because you will get short questions from this particular topic. So quick question everybody. Which among the following is obtained from organic matter? Urea, NPK, manure or superphosphate? You have 30 seconds. Pause this video right now to give me the answer. Very quickly all of you, what do you think is the correct answer? I know this chapter is very lengthy. Very good everybody, very good. Correct answer is option C, manure, which is obtained from organic substances. While these three are all examples of fertilizers that are obtained inorganically. So correct answer here is option number C. Now before I go ahead with the second aspect of it, I hope you're all clear with what is green manure. So quickly to recall, green manure that is there are basically group of plants like sun hemp and guar that are there. Now what happens? We grow those. So if I want to grow, let's say soya bean, hypothetical example. I want to grow, no, let's assume I want to grow maize. If I want to grow maize, then I want my soil to have the necessary nutrients. So rather than adding, let's say, manure or fertilizer, I can grow some crops like sun hemp and it will grow fast. Once it grows, what I'll do, I'll mix those plants with my soil and I'll mulch it, right? I'll mulch it and make like a slurry, like a, watery preparation, and I'll mix it thoroughly. And then I will grow. Now, why am I doing this? Because it has naturally enriched my soil. So that is what we mean by this. Okay. So now we will move on to the second aspect of it, which is irrigation and cropping patterns. Irrigation is a very small topic. Cropping patterns is very important on an examination point of view. So when we talk about irrigation, what is irrigation? Irrigation is nothing but the regular supply of water to the crops, right? So we say that this is the regular supply of water to the crops. Yes? Now, normally, right, how can the crops be grown? It can get water from rainfall, right? It can, or rather, what are the different sources that are there? It can get water from rainfall, water from rivers, water from canals or ponds or tube wells or wells. But we see that there is a need, right, to irrigate the water well. So what do we see? We see that from wells, we see that different types of wells exist, which is tube well and your dug wells, right? Now what happens is that all these wells collect water from your groundwater. So we see that water, one way in which we can irrigate our crops is by taking waters either from dug or tube well and then take it such that it is pumped for irrigation. So you would have seen, right, there'll be these, normally there are these TV commercials and advertisements that are there for pump, and you'll see that there'll be one hero sitting on the pump and we'll see that water is splashing out on the crop, right? We would have seen all of this. So that is normally wherein water is taken right from the tube well or a dug well. So what is well? Well is wherein you dig it deep and get the groundwater. So that is one way of irrigating or using it as a source of irrigation. Next one is a canal. Now canal, that is, there is a little more of an extensive irrigation system, right? Now if you have a river, right? If let's say there is a reservoir or a river. What is a reservoir? Now if let's say a dam is built, then there's a large storage of water, right? So that is what you call as a reservoir. Yes? So now here, let's assume that this is there. You take a diversion, right? So if you take a diversion or we take water from this river, it becomes, in the canal, water from the river is taken. Now this could be a main canal. Now as a matter of fact, I've seen these canals in, when I recently visited Chandigarh and when I was, passing through Punjab and all the, highly agricultural states where agriculture is prominently there. Canal is like a pathway through which the water will grow. And we see that there could be, from the canal, as a chotu distribution can happen or branching can happen, right? So that is what we mean by canal. Next we have river lift system. Now in some places what will happen, the reservoir, that means where I stored my water, we see that there will not be proper release of water. So normally what happens is that when there is a reservoir built, right? Now assuming this is a reservoir built. What is a reservoir? A reservoir is basically a place, right, wherein the water is stored. And normally we observe this structure when, let's say, a hydroelectric project or a dam is built. Now normally they do this so that they can provide water, sufficient water supply from here to all the agricultural fields. But if this does not happen, right, if there is inadequate release from that, what will happen? We see that water from the river is directly taken. They will directly use the water from the river in order to use it for irrigation. Then we have tanks, right? Unlike reservoirs, which are large scale storage, tank, that is, there is a small scale storage, yes? And we see that that is where water is stored and intermittently used. Ma'am, do these irrigation systems come at a high cost? Some of them, yes, comes at a high cost. Some of them come at a lower cost, yes? Okay. Is it so, Priya? I feel bad that I missed out on not meeting you, right? Because when I came to Chandigarh, I should have come and met you. Ma'am, what do we mean by water-bearing strata? So Charles, basically it means that your groundwater that is there comes at different levels, right? So your water-bearing strata are basically your water-bearing layers that are there. It's as simple as that. Where you find the groundwater, if I have to put it in simple words. So this is all about our sources of irrigation. I'll give you a break once we finish cropping patterns also. I'll give you a break once I finish cropping patterns, and then we will only be left with the last part, which is very small, right? That is a very small part that we are left with. Yes, I will tell you for sure. Okay. Now, see, that is one way that we saw irrigation, but we know that there are various techniques to irrigation also. That includes your drip water irrigation, your drip system, your sprinkler system. So this right here is also going to be very, very important, right? Now, imagine I use my nutrients wisely, I've used my water wisely, but the way I cultivate my crops also need to be effective. So this is what we mean by cropping pattern. The way I grow my crops, right? What pattern in which I grow. Now one aspect is I have a piece of land, and what I do is I grow the same crop over and over and over in that one piece of land. But what we have understood is that this is not very wise. This kind of cropping technique is not wise, which is why we see that if we have a pattern in which we grow crops such that we get better outcome. That means that I grow my crops in such a way that it is very effective. I'm using my nutrients, my water, my land very effectively. Then that is what we understand as a cropping pattern. Now, how many types of cropping patterns do we see? There are 3 kinds. We have mixed cropping, intercropping, and then of course we have your crop rotation. Now, this is a very tricky concept because we get confused, right? Now, one thing you need to understand is that hybridization is making hybrid variety. Here is just how you grow the crop. Now, those of you who get confused thinking cropping pattern and hybridization are the same, no. Cropping pattern is how you grow that crop. But hybridization is how you make a new variety of a single crop. So that is the main difference. Now that we have understood this bit, right? Let's see what is mixed cropping. Now, mixed cropping is if I have a piece of land, right? And let's assume that I grow 2 crops. I mix 2 crops. On one side, I will grow crop 1. And on the other side, I will grow crop 2. I am mixing 2 crops. But am I mixing any 2 random crops? No. I am mixing crops in such a way that I reduce the risk of, let's say, reduce the risk of both my crops failing, right? I mean, imagine I had only crop 1 and it doesn't grow well. Then I will be failing. Then I would be like, oh my God, I have no crops at the end of 3-4 months. But instead, if I grow 2 crops, and let's say 2 parts of the land, on one side you, on other side you. Even if my crop 1 fails here, I still have my crop 2, which means I can still sell this and make some profit, right? So we see that this right here is where we have crop 1 and crop 2. So mixed cropping is growing 2 or more crops simultaneously. At the same time you grow it, right? And thereby we see that wheat and gram, wheat and mustard, or let's say sunflower and groundnut, I grow it together. Now, one more important thing is that the nutrients are also utilized in a very efficient manner. I'm using my irrigation for well. I'm getting 2 in 1 instead of just 1, right? Another example that we see here is areca nut and coffee, right? Now, these are further examples. Now, a few things that you need to keep in mind is that 1, both crops should have different maturation times, right? Both crops should have different maturation times. Yes. And different water requirement. Okay. Now, when I said use water efficiently doesn't mean it will use it equally. Say, let's assume one is using more water, other one should use less water, such that overall my water is used effectively. Same way, right? The nutrients consumed also should not be only same nutrients are taken up by both plants, right? Nutrients also should be in such a way that one is using, let's say, one type of nutrients, one set of nutrients, and the other one uses another set of nutrients. Yes? So same way, like height and depth of roots, all of those are very important one, right? Or important points that you have to keep in mind. But what if one crop depletes the nutrition of the other crop? Kamal, exactly. That's why when you choose crops for mixed cropping, should not be that one is stealing from the other. Both should use nutrients in such a way that they use it effectively. They split and use their nutrients, right? Then we have intercropping. Now, intercropping, what we see is when you have definite rows, right? Usme we are mixing and growing. Now, on the other hand, we see that we are growing crops in such a way that there is a definite pattern, right? So, we see that there is a definite pattern to grow. So, ginger, cabbage, these are all examples of the same. Now, again, what do we see? We see that these crops are chosen in such a way that nutrient requirements are different and not the same, thereby ensures maximum utilization. And along with that, what do we see? It is also chosen in such a way that it prevents pests. It prevents pests and diseases from spreading, right? So this way what will happen? Both my crops are giving me good returns, right? So again, cabbage, ginger, these are all again. So earlier we saw that cabbage and ginger, this is how they would look like, right? Last but not the least, we have crop rotation. Now when we talk about crop rotation, right? Crop rotation is very simple. Crop rotation is when you grow crops one after the other, right? So you grow it one after the other on the same piece of land, right? And we see that this is what we call as crop rotation. And in this rotation, what do you observe? We see that we normally end up in one, when you do one after the other, one will always be a leguminous plant. Now, why leguminous plant? Because we see that in the root nodules of leguminous plants, we have rhizobium that again enriches the soil with nutrients and nitrogen. Hence, we see that these are what we call as root nodules. Now, what are the benefits of crop rotation? One thing you need to understand is that when you grow it alternatively, you are again, you don't need to put any fertilizer in the soil, right? Or you don't need to add too much of a fertilizer, because here, while growing the crop itself, you are getting those nutrients, right? Yes. Ma'am, crop rotation means growing crops back to back. Yes, growing it back to back, one after the other. But it is not that you will grow the same crop, right? So let's assume you have crop 1, which is corn. Then the next cycle may you will grow soybean. Then you will grow corn again. Such that whatever nutrients were used by the corn, right, it will have time to replenish, plus the soybean as it grows. It's a leguminous plant, so it will add nutrients to the soil as well, right? So that's why this right here is what we call as crop rotation. So with this, if you see, we have covered crop production management. How can I make my production techniques efficient? Yes? So here is a quick difference between all the three. You can take a quick screenshot, everyone. Take a quick screenshot of differences between mixed cropping, intercropping and crop rotation. Take a screenshot because this is very, very important. They will ask you this particular topic in the examination, right? Shall we move on? Okay. Here's a quick question for all of you. Which is the process of growing 2 or more crops on the same piece of land in a definite pattern? Very quickly, everybody. Definite pattern. Now, this is where we tend to get confused between two topics, right? So we tend to get confused between the two. But like I told you, my keyword or the keyword here is definite pattern. And if the word definite comes in, you know that the answer here is option D, which is intercropping. Now, if this word definite comes, it is inter. But if they say 2 or more crops on the same piece of land simultaneously, right? If the word simultaneously is there, then we will call this as mixed cropping. So now we have covered the second aspect of it, which is crop production management. Are we clear with this so far? We are all clear. I know I've been simultaneously taking your doubts as well. So shall we move on to the next topic, or do you want to take a quick 2-minute water break and come back to the last part? That's very simple actually. The last bit of it is very easy, right? Last bit of it is very easy. We can take a 2-minute water break. I'll also take 2 minutes. Jaldi se. So, 2-minute water break, and I will be resuming at 10:45. I know, it's a long class today, and I know I started late also. But we'll finish the chapter. See, if you've made it so far in the class, might as well stay till the very end, right? What is the point of giving up now? Abhi tak to you were there. Now it is already late. Might as well finish it and go. Then at least you will sleep telling, "Arey, improvement to ho gaya. It is a easy peasy chapter. I have nothing to worry about." Yes? Cool. 2 minutes and I'll be back. Okay, all of you, awesome. I can see that we are back. Just move my bottle out of the frame. Now we'll move on to the last leg of the chapter, right? Which is not last leg, almost last leg. Because the rest of the chapter is easy. These are the tough parts from where you will for sure get questions. Remaining part is easy peasy, you're nothing to worry about. So let's have a look at the last bit of it, which on this topic, which is going to be crop protection management. So you imagine, you got good quality seeds, you got all this, good production techniques, you did all of this. But these pests and insects will come and they will harm your crops, right? So sometimes what happens, field crops that are there get harmed by pests and insects, right? So we see that generally what happens is that they end up spreading a lot of diseases also, which is why what will happen, this is not very ideal for the crop, right? Because lot of plants that are there will decrease in yield. Yes, so we see that their yield will get affected because now the amount of crops that I can actually use have been destroyed. Yes, what are pests? Pests are basically harmful insects that kind of attack the crops, right? So their intent is to attack. But sometimes insects that are there will just end up feeding on the crop for food. So now how would these insects or pests attack? They can do it in one in three ways. They will either do it in a way where they will cut the root, right? So they could either cut the root or the stem or the leaf in entirety. Or what they will do is they will end up, sucking the cell sap that is there. Or what they will do is they will eat into the fruits, right? So we see that they will eat into the fruits as well. So thereby, in all these three ways, what will happen? They will end up damaging the crop, right? So they will end up damaging the crop. Similarly, we also see that another issue that farmers face are weeds. What are weeds? Weeds are unwanted. Or I can say, now that it is very late in the night, my spellings are all going haywire, please don't mind. So basically, unwanted or undesirable plants, right? Weeds are undesirable or unwanted plants that grow along with the crops, right? So they grow along with your crops. So, Xanthium, Parthenium, Cypernius, they're all examples of the same, right? So they're all examples of the same, and what happens is that these weeds that are there, they end up competing for nutrients, they end up competing for sunlight, right? And they also compete for space, and thereby it will affect your crops. Now, if you are somebody who has a garden at home, even in your potted plant, right? Even if you look at a potted plant, inside the potted plant, you will find as a chuntu plants that grow. Those are actually competing with your main plant for food and everything. And those are also your weeds that grow. And you can actually have a look at those as well. So here we see that one more issue that they face is growth of weeds. Now, apart from all this, sorry about that. Apart from all this, what do we see? We also see that there are various diseases that can be spread, right? So we see that there are bacterial diseases, there are fungal diseases, yes, and we see that they are all caused by disease-causing microbes or your pathogens, and these also can be spread. So we see that there is a need to protect our crops from either these pathogens, the weeds, the pests, and the insects. So how can we do this? Well, of course, for pest and insect control, we can use pesticides. So now, of course, pesticides that are there are chemicals that are normally sprayed on the crop, right? So you can spray it on the crop, and thereby, as you know, these pests will be killed off. But you know that this is not a very economical method, right? Because excessive use of chemicals that are there are not going to be good for us, and it can cause environmental pollution. Even in the case of weeds, right? Weedicides can be sprayed. Weedicides like 2,4-D are, chemical substances that can be sprayed on the plants to get rid of weeds. But again, long term, that is not very ideal, which is why preventive methods are more recommended. For example, making sure that you prep the soil well, you make sure that in the case of weedicides, you make sure that you prep the soil in such a way that there are no other kind of plants growing in and along with it. You do intercropping practices, crop rotation. They all help in controlling the growth of weeds as well, right? And even preventive measures for pests as well can be taken. So with this, what do we see? We see that with this, we will be able to take preventive measures. And in some cases, biological control can also be applied for pests as well, where some natural organisms can help us get rid of those insects, right? So this right here is something that you need to understand. Now, once you have implemented all of this and you have got your harvest, you need to make sure that you store your harvest well, right? So earlier people were storing it in jute bags or metallic bins, but again there were a lot of issues when it came to storage. For example, there also after harvesting, some rats, rodents, pests, they would all come and they would, sort of feed on it. Now at times we saw that because of the moisture content in the seeds, on the surface or wherever it be, we saw that there was growth of microorganisms, because of which, you imagine, after putting all that effort to harvest a crop, we have now lost that crop because of the fact that microbes have started to grow on it, which is why implementing storage techniques, right, was very important. Now we saw that in order to get rid of pests, microbes, especially for pests and insects, addition of neem was very important, or it was a good step to take, because neem had a characteristic smell that kind of, warded them off. And sun drying as well, right? Making sure that all grains are sun dried before storage such that there is no moisture which is present. And thereby we saw that this would reduce the growth of microbes on its surface, which is why storage is also very, very important when it comes to your crop management, right, in general, because we see that if at the end you put all the efforts and end may nothing happens, what is the point, right? What advantage are we getting out of it? So that is why we see that this is the reason. Now last but not the least, using fertilizers in farming is an example of dash. No cost production, low cost, high cost, or none of these. So here with this, if you see students, we have finished the entire topic of improving crop yields, right? This whole topic has been completed in its entirety, and now we are left with the last topic, which is animal husbandry. Now I know this animal husbandry topic that is there will take me at least 25 minutes on the bare minimum, so please stay with me till the very end and we will wind this class up soon, right? Very good, all of you. Correct answer here is option C, that is high cost. What do you mean by high cost? Because high cost means that you have to invest some money, right? People have to purchase this, right? So that is what we mean by it. Okay. Now, I know many of you may not stay with me till the end. If you are not staying with me till the end, it is okay, right? I know. By when this live class is happening, it's happening pretty late in the night. So students watching this video later, please don't mind if my voice sounds a little bit different or whatever the reason be, right? So shall we finish off the last part? Shall we finish off the last part, animal husbandry? We'll finish it off. See, it's very easy, okay? It's very, very easy. Trust me. No problem, Mayar. You can come back and watch this video. Next week, I will be doing important questions of this chapter, but that will happen at 5 p.m. So don't worry. Okay? Okay. Very good. Very good. You watch this tomorrow. No problem. Okay? I'll wind this up now. See, now we learned in detail about how plant-based sources, right? How plant-based sources can be cultivated and how we can improve its quality. But we know that the food that we eat is animal-based also. For example, the milk that we consume, people who do eat eggs or meat, they all are, of course, obtained from animals as well, right? Which is why we see and we know that agriculture is not just large-scale manufacture of crops, but it is also rearing animals as well. So in this case, we see that we have we also have animal husbandry. So what is animal husbandry? Animal husbandry is the scientific management of animal livestock, right? So we see that livestock that is there are basically a group of animals that are reared for our benefit, right? Now we see that animal husbandry is the whole branch that deals with it, which means it includes not just rearing them, it includes feeding them, breeding them, taking care of them, making sure that they have, good shelter. So today we will learn these three things in detail. So for every branch of animal husbandry that we see, these are three things that we will talk about, right? So we will learn about, I'll use white there. We will learn about feeding. We will learn about breeding. We will learn about disease control, right? Now, why is it necessary for us to learn about it? Because as you know, when there is increase in demand, there needs to be an increase in its production also, right? Which is why we are going to be learning about it. Now, animal husbandry, of course, right? So like I said, includes feeding, caring, shelter, and breeding. Now, of course, we see that animal husbandry we will be learning about cattle farming, we will be learning about poultry, we'll be learning about fisheries, and we'll last but not the least learn about beekeeping, or which is apiculture, right? So first we will start with cattle farming. Now, cattle farming, as you all know, right, when you talk about cattle farming, we see that cattle farming includes rearing of cattle, right? So we see that it includes rearing of cattle, which includes cows, it includes buffaloes, goats, sheep, so on and so forth. But today what we are going to do is we will look at only cows and mainly buffaloes, right? Now, of course, we see that in this particular case, if you look at cattle farming, why are we doing cattle farming? Yes, what is the purpose behind it? Cattle farming that is there is mainly done for two reasons. One, for getting milk or obtaining milk from it, because a lot of milk-based products are also obtained. Secondly, for labor. So this is why we rear cattle. I am able to get milk from these animals. I am able to get some work done, right? Labor done. So in this particular labor, when I say it is for doing agricultural work, like tilling, moving carts, transport, so on and so forth. So based on this, what do we see? I can broadly categorize my animals or my cattle into two. I can categorize them as milch animals, or I can categorize them as draught animals. Milch animals are those from which I get milk, while draught animals are those that give me or that do labor, right? So this is what we mean by this. Now, some examples of milch animals that are there include, cows that are there, wherein you have different breeds, right? Khilari, Kangyam, Halikar, they're all examples of some milch animals. While, oops, did I say it the other way? Oh, sorry, these are draught. My bad. These are all examples of draught animals. Khilari, Kangyam, Halikar, they are all examples of draught animals. That means that I will use them for labor. While milch animals are mainly cow, buffalo, goat, all from whom I will get milk, thereby using milk-based products. Now, when you talk about milk, right, we know that milk production that is there is mainly done by the female animals. Now, what does that depend on? Naturally, they produce milk to feed their young one. And this milk production is dependent on, to some extent, to lactation period. What is lactation period? The duration up to which they can produce the milk. Yes, which means that the period of milk production after the birth of calf. So once the young baby is born, how long can they produce the milk, right? So here if you see, this lactation period is very important, because if I want to rear cattle and I want to get milk out of them, what if I could do something where this lactation period, that is the duration in which they produce milk, I increase it, right? I increase it in such a way that they are able to produce milk for a longer period of time. Then that way I will be able to get more milk. Yes or no? You are all clear with this, no? Why that lactation period is important? So now this is important. So here you see lactation period normally, right? So if you look at some indigenous breeds are those breeds which are naturally found in India, right? So we see that they are naturally found in India. Now in this particular case, like Sahiwal, Gir, or Red Sindhi, these are all some varieties that we see. But in this case, what you need to understand is that during their lactation period, they don't produce that much milk. Okay, they produce enough milk, but they produce milk, but it's not enough. Maybe let's say it's about 1,500, let's say. So we see that, let's assume they produce about 1,500 liters per lactation period, right? That means if their lactation period is about 300 days, out of 365 days, it's 300 days. In 300 days, I'm getting only 1,500 liters. But the demand is so much more higher than 1,500 liters, which is why we see that exotic varieties, that means varieties from other countries, for example, Brown Swiss, Jersey, Holstein, they were all brought into the country. Now they were giving me 300 and 3,600 liters, 4,000 liters roughly. I'm not giving you exact estimate, around that much. So they were giving me double of what my indigenous. India mein whatever cows you find, they were giving me double. But we had an issue. All these cows or all these varieties are coming from a different country, right? They are all coming from a different country. Now they are coming and they are living in our country. So there is difference in climatic conditions, right? So firstly, there is difference in climatic conditions. They will be more, sensitive to, the diseases that are there, which is why what do we observe? We saw that they were falling sick easily. But our cows that are, not our cows, but the indigenous cows or the indigenous varieties that were there, they were used to it. So they were good, or they had good disease tolerance. That is why, what did they decide? They decided that we will make a hybrid. So we see that we got a hybrid, or let's say an exotic variety. What is an exotic variety? An exotic variety is a variety that is not from our country, that is giving me more milk, and we cross it with a variety that is disease resistant, right? So when we cross it, we get a cow, or we get a hybrid variety that is giving me high milk yield, and that is also disease resistant, right? So what am I getting? I am getting something that is giving me both my desired qualities. Ma'am, how do we get milk year round? So Arvind, basically what they have done is, naturally every organism, or in this case every cattle, will have a set lactation period. But what they will do is, with supplements to it, with their diet and with all of that, they will increase the lactation period. So they will provide such, supplements in such a way that they will increase it. So in one way, if you think about it, the lactation period increases for longer, and that's how we get year around. And even it's not like one cow or one goat or one sheep. You think about the number as well. The magnitude of at which cattle farming happens is also important. Biju Kumar, kindly avoid. It's too late in the night to be spamming. Neither do I have energy right now to deal with spammers, right? So with this, we understand that cattle farming happens, right? Now, which is commonly improving cattle breeds. See, cattle breeds that you see, there are so many kinds of cattle breeds. See, Girlando, you have one more with Brown Swiss as well, right? One more cross with Brown Swiss is there. I'm not able to remember at this point. But those are all, some cattle breeds that we commonly find at this point, right? So we see that they are often found in and around us. Now, we see that there are a few important things to keep in mind. First and foremost, making sure that whenever we are rearing these cattle, right? Whenever we are rearing the cattle must be provided with a proper shelter. See, they are also animals, right? They are also living organisms. We need to treat them right. So whenever we are rearing them, we should make sure that proper cleaning happens, proper shelter facilities are there, and making sure that their overall well-being is maintained. Now we need to make sure that they are groomed regularly and make sure that they have proper ventilation, right? So maintenance is required, because you see all of this end may will have an impact on milk production. If the cow is not kept healthy, then the quality of milk or the amount of milk that we will end up getting is going to be very, very less. Which is why making it a point that well ventilated rooms, right? Protection from rain. They should be make sure that they are kept in clean facilities are all very important, because thereby they will not fall sick, right? The chances, if they're kept in a good environment, healthy environment, they will not fall sick. They will be kept healthy itself. While on the other hand, even the food that we give should be important. Now normally what do we see? We see that normally the diets that are there will be filled with roughages and concentrates, right? Now roughages that are there have high fiber. So if roughages are added, they will have high fiber content, but there will be low nutrients, right? Low nutrients but more fiber. While concentrates that are there will have high levels of proteins, and we see that other nutrients will be there, which is why we see that animals that are there are given a diet wherein there is a mix of these in such a way that enables them to get more milk, right? So we see that it enables them to get in such a way that they're able to produce more milk, not get more milk, but produce more milk. Yes. So if in such a way, if their diet includes these two, so in that way we see that, and if they have a balanced diet, they're able to produce more milk. Yes? Awesome. Now, of course, we see that apart from this, vaccination is also necessary, right? Because you know that cattle can fall sick easily and they're susceptible to a lot of diseases, which is why in this case, what do we see? They need to be given vaccinations, and again, they are susceptible to falling sick because of parasites, pathogens, you name it, they can fall sick. So regular vaccination, making sure that they are given antibiotics just in case, all of these are super important so that they can be kept healthy. They can be kept healthy, only then milk production is also going to happen effectively. So with this, if you see, we have understood about the importance of it. Now, of course, right, we saw that milk production considerably increased. So the idea of implementing hybrid varieties, increasing lactation period, right, so on and so forth, all of this brought in a large increase in the production of milk, and we call this as the White Revolution of India. And we see that this project in itself was called as Operation Flood. Now this was pioneered by Dr. Verghese Kurian, who was called as the father of White Revolution. Similarly, we have had Yellow Revolution, Blue Revolution, Purple Revolution, all of which has revolutionized the way in which we large-scale manufacture various substances. So quickly to recall, we looked at cattle farming, how we have milch animals and draught animals, how we use the milch animals to our benefit for getting milk. What is milk production dependent on? Lactation period. What is lactation period? Lactation period is basically the duration in which an organism produces milk, right? That is the duration. Now, that duration is from when the calf is born or the young baby is born, right? Now, of course, we saw that in order to maximize this, hybrid varieties are preferred because they will be a hybrid of indigenous and your exotic variety. Indigenous variety is what we find in our country. Exotic is something that is found from other countries and they are imported. Now when we create a hybrid of this, we get a hybrid variety that is not only disease resistant but that can produce maximum amount of milk. Now along with this, one thing that we understand is that when we have this, right, or let me go back to that. Apart from this, we also need to take care of it. So making sure that proper conditions are maintained, giving them a proper diet, and ensuring that they are treated well and vaccinated is necessary for us. So here's a quick question on which among the following is an example of an exotic cattle breed, right? So you can pause this video right now to give me the answer. Students who are here in the live class, very quickly you can give me the answer. We have Sindhi, Brown Swiss, Devni and Gir. But here we know in this particular case, as we all know, the correct answer is option B, Brown Swiss. Because Sindhi, Devni, Gir are all examples of your indigenous variety, while Brown Swiss is an exotic variety which is imported. Now we will move on to the next one, which is going to be poultry farming. See, poultry farming is also very simple. It is not complicated. Think of yourself as the person who wants to do it, right? So when you look at poultry farming is basically where you go grow poultry. Now what are poultry? Poultry include birds from which you get eggs or you use them for your meat, right? So basically it is used for meat. So you see that chicken, geese, I'll not say chicken meat, but meat in general, right? So here as you see chicken, geese, ducks, turkey, they all come under the category of poultry, right? Because of what reason? Because we get both eggs from them and we also get meat from them, right? Now we see that birds from which we get eggs, right? We call such birds as layers. What are layers? Layers are birds from which we obtain eggs, or they are reared only because of the eggs. While on the other hand, when you look at broilers are those birds which are reared for their meat. Now you see that you have two categories, right? We have two categories of poultry. So based on that, we see that when we grow these animals, right, we see that there are some desirable traits that we look for. First and foremost, when you think about it, right, let's assume when we are looking for hybridization or when we are looking at a particular, let's say a particular variety, yes, what are the things that we look for? First and foremost, the kind of number and quality of young ones or chicks that they make, right? So if they are able to produce healthy chicks, then I'm able to rear more and more of them, right? So we see that in this particular case, this is very important. Now a broiler parent is, probably preferred for a commercial chick production, right? So these are some, observations that they have made that they prefer to have. Then of course adaptability. So during summers or during heat conditions, right, tolerance to high temperature is something that we look for so that they don't, have adverse effects because of that. And low maintenance requirement. Normally with poultry, what is observed is that it is a very high maintenance thing because these poultry birds can fall sick very easily. So if you're able to get a hybrid variety which does not require so much, maintenance, but it is able to survive with low maintenance also, that will also be preferable, right? Last but not the least, we see that reduction in the size of egg-laying bird with the ability to use, simply put, based on the diet that they consume, we are able to produce birds that may produce the egg-laying birds, especially reduction in its size, so that the smaller they are, they end up taking lesser amount of food, right? Cheaper diets that are there. So these are some desirable traits, which is why we see that over a period of time, from the indigenous varieties that we have, that means they are locally found in our country, like Asil and Kadaknath, we see that the exotic breeds like White Leghorn or Rhode Island Red, they were crossed, right? So we saw that hybrid varieties were crossed between in exotic variety and a local variety, such that we could get the desirable traits that we just discussed. Yes? So this is all about poultry farming. Now, quickly to go back, right? That slide always seems to have a problem. But when you talk about it, the diet that goes for this is very important because you have two categories, no? You have broilers, which are reared for their meat, and you have layers, right? You have layers that are there which are reared for their eggs. Now the requirement from these two are different. Now you cannot have the same diet given to both these poultry birds, which is why if you look at broilers, we see that normally they are fed with a diet that is rich in vitamins, right? And we also see that they have a lot of care that is given into it so that they don't fall sick easily, and of course, right, their body weight is maintained in such a way that they are sold, because again, look at it, it is sold for its meat, right? Which is why we see that the requirement is something that you need to keep in mind. While on the other hand, right, if you look at the layers, they are given, right? So we see that layers that are there are normally given with a lot of fat content in them, lot of proteins that are mentioned in their diet so that they produce the eggs, right? So normally what do we see overall between these two? Both vitamin A and K levels are maintained such that their body can protect itself maybe from some harmful diseases that are there. Yes? So here you need to understand one thing. Nutritional requirement between broilers and layers are different. They are different. Why? Because of what reason we are rearing them for. And last but not the least, because they can be susceptible to various pathogenic diseases and of course to nutritional deficiencies, we need to keep in mind that we need to keep in mind that the diet that we provide is able to tackle it. They are able to protect themselves. Because you imagine you rear them for the eggs or you rear them for the meat, right? And they end up falling sick. Then what will happen? All the money that you've invested or that is no longer usable for you. Thereby, it will affect the demand that is there. That is why we see that steps or precautions in poultry farming are very, very important. Yes? Are we all clear? Yes or no? Okay. I can see that many of you are clear. Now we will move on to the last two parts. See, we have moved to the last bit of it. It's not too complicated. The last two parts and the only part which is going to be a little tricky for you is probably going to be fisheries, right? Fishery or fish farming is going to be something, or large scale production of fish is going to be something that's going to be tricky. But trust me, this is also very simple and easy, right? Yes, we will be doing it soon. Now in this particular case, when we talk about fishes, we see that fish that is there is a very cheap source of protein, right? We see that it's a cheap source of protein. And if you look at it, we see that there are various animals like shellfishes, prawns, in some cases octopus, squid, all of this, we see that provide a source of protein. And we see that they all come under the category of seafood. Now we see that all of them, right, they can be obtained naturally. Or the other way in which we can do is by rearing them. So that is what we will talk about when we talk about fish production. Now fish farming that is there is when you rear them, right? So rearing of organisms, right? Rearing of these organisms, your aquatic or rearing of these organisms that are there is what we call as fish farming, right? And they are done in a large scale. So as you can see, we are rearing them artificially. Or else what can I do? I can naturally take it, right? So I can naturally take it by capturing them. So this is what I will call as capture fish farming, where I will use, net, like, capture nets, or I can use, techniques like sonar and all of that, and thereby I can capture my fishes. Or else what can I do? I can culture them. Now I can culture my marine fishes and I can culture my freshwater sources also, right? So I can culture these two. Now broad scale rearing that you see is what we call as aquaculture. Aquaculture includes all of your aquatic organisms that are there. Now your fish production includes all these organisms, of course. Now your marine fishery that is there. So let me just go back. Now when you talk about the marine fisheries, right, we see that the marine fisheries are mainly where you get the marine water or the marine organisms. So here you have some examples that you find in the case of your marine fishes, right? So mackerel, hilsa, these are all some examples that you see. Now normally those what are there, they are captured, right? Pomfret, mackerel, tuna, these are all some very common examples apart from Bombay duck and so on and so forth. Now normally for marine fishery what we have observed is capture fishery happens where they capture these fishes. And of course we see that these fishes that are there like mullets and pearl spots, all of them tend to have a high economic value also. But in order to capture them, we can use fish nets, or we see that even sonar is used, such that on detecting or using the sonar technique, we see that on basically using this, we are able to detect the position of it and thereby capture them. Then of course we see that echo sounders is what I just told you about, is sonar and all of that, right? So here we see that yield can be increased by using such techniques, right? Wherein we are able to locate large schools or large groups of fishes and capture them. But this is of course not very ideal, right? Because over a period of time, natural fishes that are there, they'll get trapped. So we see that they will further get depleted. Thereby we see that if that happens naturally, not like people will be like, okay, we don't want it. There is still demand, which is why we have to meet it through culture fishery. See, culture fishery is a technique, right? It's a technique where you culture it artificially or you rear it in a specific part. Capture is where you capture it naturally. Now, when I culture my marine fishes, I will call this process as mariculture, right? Mariculture is when I will rear my or I will grow my marine fishes. Yes? But now, of course, it's not that this is only possible for marine fishes, possible for your inland fishes also, right? Or your freshwater sources. Now, your freshwater sources include lake, pond, and it includes rivers. We also have some brackish sources as well, like estuaries. Yes? So, we see that in all these cases, we are able to rear inland fishes as well, right? Now, some examples of varieties that are reared in this manner include rohu, katla, carp. They are all examples, right? So we have rohu, katla, common carp, so on and so forth. Now I request that you remember these three examples because it's easy. Because you will use these three examples further as well. So now of course we see that in order to do inland fishes, right, or inland fishery, basically your freshwater sources, you can do it one in two ways. One is what we can do is along with rice crops, right? Along with rice crops, what happens is that for growing rice, you need large amount of water, right? You require a large amount of water. So with that, what you can do in the paddy field only, you can rear some of these crops. Or else what you can do composite farming. Now what is this composite farming? Now composite farming is based on the fact that different fishes, right? We see that different fishes have different feeding habits. That means that there are some fishes which are bottom feeders, right? So we see that some fishes which feed deep in the ground, right? Which we will call as bottom feeders. Some which are found in the middle, right? So we will call them as middle zone fishers, and some which are top dwellers or which are found on the top, right? So here what do we see? We see that Katla that is there is an example of a surface feeder, right? Then I have rohu, which is normally a middle zone feeder. Then I have carp. I told you, remember these three because it will come handy, which is in the bottom. Now what will happen is, when I do culture fishery using composite farming, let me recall. What is culture fishery? Rearing them in an artificial environment, right? Maybe a tank or a part of a reservoir or whatever it be. But in that, if I do composite farming, what is composite farming? It is a technique where I can rear 3-in-1 fish, right? 3 fishes I can rear in such a way that they are all different, they have different feeding habits. So that what will happen? In the same reservoir, I am able to get 3 different types, right? I am able to grow 3 at once. Otherwise, what will happen? If they are all found growing, let's assume all middle zone dwellers were there, there will be competition for food. If there is competition for food, what will happen? They will not be able to grow properly. Hence, composite farming is recommended. So, which is why over a period of time, what we have observed is that even, not just that, even for making sure that the eggs that are there, or what we call as the seed, right? We make sure that hormonal simulation or hormonal techniques are used such that fishes are able to give us good quality seeds, or what we call as good quality eggs, right? So with this, everybody, we are done with fisheries also. Karka, there are many types. Yes, there are many types that are there. Now, quick question on rohu and katla are example of what? Freshwater fishes, marine water fishes, both 1 and 2, or none of the above. Now this right here is very simple and easy. The timer has started. You can pause this video to give me the answer. But we know that both are examples of freshwater fishes, right? So with this, we are done with fish production and we will move on to beekeeping, which is also known as apiculture. Now, apiculture is the practice of beekeeping, taking care of bees, management of them on a large scale, right? On a large scale. Now, of course, if you and I were to look at bees, we will not be like, oh, very friendly things. No, we are normally terrified of bees. But bees have a very important role in our ecosystem, right? Because we see that commercially, we get a lot of honey, beeswax, and from beeswax, we make a lot of products, right? So this right here is very, very important. Now, this is not very labor intensive, but it requires a certain level of skill, right? And of course, it requires a certain level of protective gear also. So now we see that normally bee farms are there wherein the honeybees are red, right? So we see that honeybees are red, wherein normally what you see, they have this kind of a setup which reminds the bees of a honeycomb. Now normally they are found in a honeycomb, right? But they have this setup which reminds them of it and they'll start producing the honey. So we see that at this scale they are able to do it, or with the help of this they are able to do it at a large scale. So bee farms are also known as apiaries, right? From which you get honey, beeswax and so on. Now we see, of course, I'm not going into the details of it, it's a little beyond it. But one thing you need to understand is how honey is formed, right? So we have a queen bee which will lay its egg in one compartment of the honeycomb, which we call as a brood. Then from there, once the larva is hatched, we see that the worker bee will, sort of make sure that it takes care of it. And from here, what it will do during this process, we see that it will keep filling in things, right? So we see that this right here, we see that as the worker bee, keeps taking care of it, eventually the larva will become an adult bee. So this right here is a quick life cycle that is there. Can the queen bee only reproduce? Yes, only the queen bee can reproduce in this particular case, right? Now, of course, some varieties that we see are Indian bee, rock bee, little bee. These are all some examples that are commonly used in apiaries. So with this, everybody, we come to the end of today's class. Now, I know today's class was a very long hour. I think it is a 3-hour class at this point, right? I started at 8:30 and I finished at 11:30. So that's 3 hours of today. But like I said, this chapter, and I'm sure, I know some point whether you are watching this later or whether you're watching it now, I always make it a point that I tell you, if you commit yourself, my promise to you is that I will try my best to make sure that the concepts are made as easy as possible, right? I try my best to make sure, and I know at some point some things would have been confusing, may require you to go back and read the textbook, but if you made it till the very end, I am super proud of all of you. So going to give you a quick homework question which you can give me the answer for tomorrow, where how do good animal husbandry practices help farmers, or they help people who practice animal husbandry? So please make it a point to let me know the answer in the comments of this video. Now, of course, as you all know, BYJU'S 9th and 10th grade channel has got you covered, and we make it a point that we go out of our way to help you understand concepts, because it's not just that we are here just to teach you for the sake of it. You are like our own children. So if you've made it till the very end, I am very proud. I hope you enjoyed this class. If you did, don't forget to let me know in the comments of this video. So I'll not keep you long anymore further. I will see you all soon. But up until then, students, take care. Lots of love to all of you, and bye-bye. Good night.